Hello again. I am the Shaggy Dog Philosopher. This is the Shaggy Dog Philosophy Podcast. You have caught me in a nearly,
Power off.
nearly ready state. Almost forgot to put on my shirt and hat, and my ears are crooked. Let me fix that. There we go. Let me look a little alert today. What do we think about that? For now, that'll just have to do. Thank you for being here. I am the Shaggy Dog Philosopher. This is the Shaggy Dog Philosophy Podcast. We're doing another Shaggy Dog Chew Toys live, wherein I will be reading for you something that I like to work my mind on. Uh, the literature that I'm going to be reading for you today is called Chew Toys. I should have probably said this to begin with, but I did it. I did it ironically, and it takes all of us time to process some of the things we've said and the choices that we've made. And I'll clue you in, future audience, because I'm alone, and that's fine. I'm fine with that. Um, and then immediately I distract myself thinking that I can multitask. We know better. Uh, Chew Toys. I like to keep my mind sharp with puzzles and games, and suddenly I have a tickle in my throat. Puzzles and games and logic can be both. And so I don't read a lot of fiction anymore because I got to reading, let's say, mystical and supernatural, let's say, nonfiction, for those who want to disagree that it's not all fantasy, or for those who want to disagree that it is all fantasy. Um, and so now I need to tell you, rather than expand out what it means to exercise my mind on logic, games, riddles, etc., puzzles, and how literature of the sort that we're working with can be puzzles, because I think that should be self-evident to you that I'm puzzling through this, even if you've never seen it. If you just sit down with just this one, this is your first, and you sit down from here moving forward, you'll see that I'm asking a lot of is it, or is that true, or is that reflective of reality, things like that. And I'm the reason we're going to be visiting a lot of meta text and in this whole project and throughout, this is going to be something that I plan to never stop doing to the best of my ability. um, we're going to be chewing on these things, not necessarily to discard them, but many of them will end up ruined when we're done. That's why it's a chew toy. And so what I want to the reason I'm distracting myself is because there are two things that I meant to do before I clicked go and that I didn't do. I wanted to be here before I was 15 minutes late, and I have succeeded at that, but I haven't told anyone that I'm doing this. So forgive me into the future, but you're a savvy enough viewer that you know how to fast forward. So just give me some give me a moment, not give me some time. Allow me a moment, please, because I can no longer remember. There we go. I don't know why I did it that way. I'm sorry about that. I don't know why I'm doing this the way I am. Aha, that's what I wanted. And then immediately, when we get going, I will have two songs that I would like to read for you, because I think they're relevant. They're relevant to my life. Um, the record that I'm going to be reading from for you is from 2000. I found it in 2005, which was a very difficult year for me. Sorry if I'm not speaking loudly. I'm doing the last little bit of maintenance. 2004 was a difficult year for me. Um, 2005 as well. I spent I graduated high school in 2005, and I spent the summer and let's just say the summer. I spent the summer of 2005 homeless and homelessness again. And so the lessons that this record taught me are the kind of lessons that you don't realize that you're carrying with you for your whole life. Because sometimes you forget that you ever listened to a record. And so I would like to do a performative reading of two Bill Shatner songs from Has Been for you. I have my coffee drink, and in the name of full disclosure, I have been dipping into my personal savings, which are meant to go to liberating me from this abusive shithole that I have found myself in, to get coffee drinks and hot protein. And I'm not embarrassed about that, but it's going to be a problem soon. Hello. I'm still getting comfortable, still getting set in here. Oh, hey, Swole. I am actually going to right now share this to Twitter because I'm ready. It's good to see you, Swole. Thanks for being here, bud. Um, into into the future, you should definitely follow Swole Noggin on Twitter. He's one of the people that, whether you would call it inspires or teaches, however you like, he does that for me. And we're almost done. I am sorry that this one is going to. Well, they all start like this, don't they? All right, now I think I have promoted this. I have inadequately told you what I'm going to be doing because we're going to circle back around on that. And now, at the 7 minute mark, now that I've officially missed introducing myself, giving a good first impression to everybody who's clicking on this for the first time, we're going to start over at 7 minutes by, I want to see if I can screen share real quick. Um, Forgive me for wasting your time, Swole. I am aware that I am doing that. I don't have access to that feature yet. Okay, so I can't screen grab yet. That's fine. I want to use screen grab to show you pictures of things as I'm talking about them, to be a little bit more visual than my background and my dumb face. But also, I would like to show you pictures of Jane Roberts eventually. Yeah, my computer's going to be too slow. Yeah, it doesn't even think I'm connected to the internet. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. So what we're going to do is I have this open on the wrong place, but I'm going to read for you portions, maybe excerpts is the correct word. Hey, yeah, no problem, Swole. Thank you for that. Um, I'm going to use. I'm concerned that if I do this the way I have it set up, I'm going to crash my computer. So in the interest of not crashing my computer, I'm going to start over. I did say I was starting over at the 7 minute mark, and this is the first time I've ever tried to do the particular thing that I'm doing. So I am not embarrassed about this, and neither should you when you're doing something for the first time and people are watching you. There's a particular pathology that comes with school, but with the workplace of feeling embarrassed that someone is watching you do something, especially for the first time. If they are being hypercritical of you and it's your first time, they don't need to be watching you, and you don't need to value their opinion of you. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so it's not that I'm telling you that if you don't like that I'm not being a good broadcaster, because I'm not being a good broadcaster. I appreciate your opinion is what I'm telling you. It's a valid and it's a good opinion, and you're allowed to have it, and you should You should definitely tell me if this you don't like this. That said, most of these I start impromptu, so I'm just gonna have to cope. I keep saying that too. I'll get better, I promise. When I'm making money, I'm fed, and I'm on a sleeping schedule, and hopefully, have a stable home environment. This will get a lot easier for all of us. Okay, when I read these poems, when I read this extended literature, I'm going at it with the idea that I'm speaking to people that have not listened to any of the previous Jane Roberts. So if you have and you're here with me now, thank you for having done that, and thank you for being here. Into the future, this is for people who haven't. These poems, these songs, they're about set and setting. They're about getting our heads into a particular space. And so what happens to me is I finish recording. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, and we are officially going now. I finish recording and I say, okay, all I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm just going to read straight from Jane Roberts, and that's all we're going to say. And so I woke up today and I made that promise to the audience on Twitter. And then I got into a conversation with my mutuals on Twitter and then in my group chat on Twitter. And look, this is just something that if you don't like hearing the my life on Twitter stuff, I'm an artist and a semi-professional, an amateur on Twitter. And so that's just a part of my life that we're all going to have to cope with. I never used to like it either, but it's just life in the 21st century. Anyway, and they were talking things around my interests in this subject, whether they were doing it because they listened to me or not is irrelevant to me. I like to separate myself from that when I'm thinking, and I realized that I still have more supplemental literature at my fingertips to talk about the things that they were talking about without talking about them. As a shaggy dog philosopher, that's this I introduced this in the description too for anybody new. As a shaggy dog philosopher, it's important to me to not say anything, to leave the conclusions, the moral, the ethic, all of it to you. This is a huge and deliberate critique of Barth's, I think his first name is Roman, of Barth's and the death of the author. In this medium, I am also an author. I'm a literary critic, and I do not die when I hit end stream. Neither does my ability to stop metatextualizing. To paraphrase Adam Smith, what a philosopher does that's unique from all of the other divisions of human labor is that philosophers take evidently, I need to figure out where my hands are. They take evidently separate ideas up here, up here, up here, up here, up here, over here. All of this is a four-dimensional representation of reality, and then they bring them all into a single point, and they see what happens when they mull them together. And so that's an alchemical idiom. It's an alchemical imagery, iconography. It's an alchemical idea, but alchemy began at the development of pigment from things with color that the pigment alchemist wanted. So this is all connected in a straight line in time and ideology. So I'm allowed to do this, the kind of waffling, the not saying anything. In fact, by putting it up front that we're shaggy dogging and chew toying, this is kind of my way of telling you through the fourth and even maybe a fifth wall that this is me literally chewing the scenery in soliloquy terms. Okay. Now we're at 14 minutes. We're actually 15 seconds ahead of 14 minutes. So when I segue to this, I'm going to look like I know what the hell I'm doing. I would like to read for you from William Shatner on his Has Been album, because William Shatner has gotten a lot of shit. He got a lot of shit for making spoken word records. He did a bad job on his first one when he tried to sing. He's not a good singer, and that's fine. So he pivoted to spoken word poetry, and he inspired me. And that's enough for it to be quantifiably of a higher degree of art than the conversation that I found myself in with my friend Tom. And I love Tom deeply. We argue a lot, and that's really good for me. Iron sharpens iron, and that he hasn't run away from me yet means that Tom is fundamentally stronger than I am, and that's awesome. he just comes up a lot because he and I argue a lot, and that's beautiful. So I wanna read. I would like to not be. I would like to have the self control necessary to not read for you these whole songs, because songs can be repetitive, and that's besides the point. The whole song is besides the point. I just want to read for you excerpts if I can have that self control. These songs, fundamentally, I don't want you thinking about your personal life. I don't want you thinking about William Shatner. I don't want you thinking about any of that. I want you thinking about the kind of person who would channel the ghost of a famous philosopher who innovated a religion, a science, and a philosophy. What kind of person believes they have the intellectual integrity and authority to channel that person and fundamentally rewrite their work? That's what these meta-textual pieces that I'm providing for you are. Because when I'm reading her, if I just read her straight, I would be arguing contextually with the pieces I'm just reading to you. So we can skip that and it can live in your brain so you can use it very much in the way this isn't for Swole. I would say this even if Swole weren't here. Very much in the way that Paul encouraged early Christians to use the Gospels and the biblical testament as a shield and armor and a weapon to defend yourself against people who want you to believe harmful things to you. Harmful things to you. Okay. The first song I want to read for you is called Common People. The second song is called It Hasn't Happened Yet. And It Hasn't Happened Yet is the one that I want to leave you on. So I might save it like somebody who knows what he's doing, like I promised I am. I'm not. I've seen it done a million times. Um, I'm going to save it. I'm going to promise myself the self-discipline to save it for later. And then, so anyway, from William Shatner's Common People, we're going to transition back into William James, and I have a very special surprise for you. And then we're going to read another William Shatner. We're going to bookend this like somebody who knows what he's doing. You ready? I don't have the self-control, but I'm going to try. She came from Greece. She had a thirst for knowledge. She studied scripture at St. Martin's College. That's where I caught her eye. She told me that her dad was loaded. I said, well, in that case, I'll have a rum and coke. She said, fine. And in 30 seconds' time, she said, I want to live like common people. I want to do whatever common people do. I want to sleep with common people. I want to sleep with common people like you. Well, what else could I do? I said, I'll see what I can do. I took her to a supermarket. I don't know why, but it had to start somewhere, so it started there. I said, pretend you've got no money. She laughed and said, oh, but you're so funny. And I said, yeah, well, I don't see anybody else smiling in here. Are you sure you want to live like common people? And this is for you, the audience, as much as it was for her, the girl he was talking to. You want to see whatever common people see? You want to sleep with common people? You want to sleep with common people like me? But she didn't understand. She just smiled and held my hand. You'll never live like common people. You'll never do whatever common people do. You'll never fail like common people. You'll never watch your life slide out of you and dance and drink and screw because there's nothing else to do. That means something to me because there is something else to do. You don't just have to dance. You don't have to just dance along. And you don't have to drink yourself to death. And screwing around isn't the answer either. We can be serious and we can be thoughtful and we can be devoted to something that matters to us, even if it doesn't matter to anybody else. And so now we're going to transition to William James. because it doesn't have to matter to anybody else. It doesn't have to. You can keep going just because it matters to you. It mattered enough to Bill to record it, right? And so I don't remember if I read this whole first section of William James' introduction to his work. Does consciousness, in scare quotes, exist? I don't remember. I started to talk about it either today or yesterday, and I don't remember why I distracted myself. I do that, but I have severe brain damage from childhood head injuries, and that's a great thing to click in on. Hey, Kerm, um, I have brain damage, and so it's going to become degenerative, and it is going to become I can't remember the word right now, but that's why I can't remember things like this, and that's why I distract myself away from heavy topics. And so I don't remember why I started saying this. In fact, I think it was to let you understand how this works for me. And so I don't remember where I left off with Bill. Yeah, these books are brain damage, Kerm. Um, I don't remember where I left off with Bill James, but I do want to repeat this last paragraph before we move on into his next chapter. And I can give myself 30 or 40 minutes, maybe an hour and a half with this piece. So we might read the first and second chapters of Does Consciousness Exist, which is an essay, not a book. And it is in the public domain because it's from like 1906 or 1908. Um, Yeah. Now, I like this essay, Kerm, and that's why I want to pick up in the middle of the introduction because it's important, and I should put this after what I'm going to read next, but I'm really excited to read that, and I want to read it when I'm a little bit less emotional. So we're going to go right into Bill James. I'm done waffling. I'm waffling because this picks up in the middle of a thought, and that's what I want you to think about, is how when we move forward, Jane Roberts is going to pick up in the middle of thoughts, but they're between days, not between paragraphs. And I want you asking yourself whether these are the stitches of a master. Here we go. But in addition to this, we are supposed by almost everyone to have an immediate consciousness of consciousness itself. When the world of outer fact ceases to be materially present, and we merely recall it in memory or fancy it, the consciousness is believed to stand out and to be felt as a kind of impalpable inner flowing, which, once known in this sort of experience, may equally be detected in presentations of the outer world. The moment we try to fix out attention upon consciousness and to see what distinctly it is, says a recent writer, it seems to vanish. It seems as if we had before us a mere emptiness. When we try to introspect the sensation of blue, all we can see is the blue. The other element is as if it were diaphanous. Diaphanous, I believe, means gas-like, maybe spirit-like. Yet it can be distinguished if we look attentively enough and know that there is something to look for. Consciousness, he parentheticals, Bewusstheit, and that's not irrelevant because what he's making very clear here, and I am going to interrupt Bill to talk as well. Um, it's very important here that he's using the English word and the German word because the French word is conscientiousness. Uh, however, that actually works out into French. And so this is an idea that is not well defined and is not universal, even among the bigger Western European language systems. Something else I would like to point out here is that he's pointed out an anonymous, um, what are those called? Editorial writer in a newspaper to give uh, context for what the average person believes consciousness is, and then now he's going to introduce an anonymous philosopher with this double definition. Consciousness, parenthetical Bewusstheit, says another philosopher, is inexplicable and hardly describable. Yet all conscious experiences have this in common, that what we call their content has a peculiar reference to a center for which self is the name, in virtue of which reference alone the content is subjectively given, or appears he ellipsates here to a period. While in this way consciousness, or reference to a self, is the only thing which distinguishes a conscious content from any sort of being that might be there with no one conscious of it, yet this only ground of the distinction defies all closer explanations. The existence of consciousness, although it is the fundamental fact of psychology, can indeed be laid down as certain, can be brought out by analysis, and can neither be defined nor deduced from anything but itself. Now, I would like to stop here. I know that I'm speaking to two extremely intelligent and smart and well-read men who are in fact better well-read than I am. This is for the recorded in the future audience. That was not William James saying that. So if we remember back to the last four parts of what we've heard Jane Roberts say in William James' mouth, he's giving you elaborate purple prose definitions of common sense things that you already know, and which he in ways in which he decidedly did not in life. He would have just given you the common sense definition, then the academic definition, and then he would have broken it apart and told you how both of them were subtly wrong, because he's also here to make a buck. So now he's going to break it apart to make a buck. Can be brought out by analysis, he emphasizes with single quotations. This author says, this supposes that the consciousness is one element, moment, factor, call it what you like, of an experience of essentially dualistic inner constitution, from which, if you abstract the content, the consciousness will remain revealed to its own eye. Again, future audience, anyone who doesn't know what he's talking about, I don't want you to feel like you need to know what he's talking about. There's a lot of this that I would have to read these sentences multiple times in order to tease out what he's talking about. It's antique language, and he is not speaking to you or to me. I'm a folk philosopher. I am not a member of the Scottish school of the 19th century. He's speaking a very specific, very scientific language. You don't need to understand it. If you do, great for you. Tell me what it means. Experience at this rate would be much like a paint of which the world pictures were made. Paint has a dual constitution, involving as it does a menstruum, which is a word I don't know, but we're moving on. He parentheticals with oil, size, or whatnot, and a mass of content in the form of pigment suspended therein. So I would like to pat myself on the back for talking about pigmentation earlier in the recorded version of this, because he and I don't remember having read this. If I did read it to you, oh, come on now. Anyway, um, uh, he and I are, if I did read this before, then I was thinking about it, and I don't deserve the pat on the back. But if I did not read this before, I deserve that pat on the back, because he and I are we're thinking on a wavelength. Now, that's what Jane Roberts thinks she's doing when she's channeling him. I am convinced of that. I can't make that claim, and I can't sell it to you. I'm not trying to teach you that. That's my opinion, and let's say allegedly, because I don't want her. I really do want you to buy her work, and I really don't want you to attack anybody who likes her work. Kerm, you can do whatever you want. Swole's not going to. I'm clearly not talking to you, man, and I apologize for that. But I don't want you to attack her. I don't want you to attack her fans. I don't want you to burn her work. If what I want you to do is I want you to buy it. And if you don't want it, buy it used from somebody who's selling it from a garage sale, or from a person who loved that book. And if you don't want it, give it to me, and let's play the Warrens with it, and let's get all of the energy that was put into these books to love them, and let's refocus it at something else, if you would prefer to think of it that way. I don't think I'm going to think of it that way, but do support these people. Support them, even if they're wrong. We can't keep using money to kill ideas, because what it does is it makes the communities that like the ideas resentful, and then you get Graham Hancock. And do you really want more Graham's Hancock? I don't want more Graham's Hancock. We can get the pure menstruum by letting the pigment settle, says William James, and the pure pigment by pouring off the size or oil. We operate here by physical subtraction, and the usual view is that by mental subtraction, we can separate the two factors of experience in an analogous way, not isolating them entirely, but distinguishing them enough to know that they are two. Okay, that's interesting. I did. I did. I'm not reading that into the mic. You can join the live chat. Uh, yeah, I don't remember what I was gonna say. That's funny. Um, what he's saying here is that uh, monism doesn't work. He's making the argument for you that monism doesn't work, and monism was a big handcock in the 19th century among Germans. So this Bush, what he's saying is that the Bushweis, the Bushwistbeistein, however that I could pronounce it earlier, however that word is pronounced, that's just a big circle jerk, is what he just said in that paragraph. So now we move on to the second part. Now, my contention is exactly the reverse of this. Experience, I believe, and he has this italicized, has no such inner duplicity, and the separation of it into consciousness and content comes not by way of subtraction, but by way of addition. And this is what I wanted to comment on that. He's broadly talking about how Kabbalah and negative approaches to truth can only get you asymptotic of truth. They can that's not a good. So an asymptote is a curved graph, and it's a, I don't remember how they call it in the math, but anyway, it's a point that as the graph approaches zero, never reaches zero. It infinitely approaches without reaching zero. That's what an asymptote is. Um, and so what he's saying is that Kabbalah and Kabbalistic negative approaches to truth can only get you asymptotically to God. You can never reach zero. You can never reach God through negative approaches. And I spend a lot of ink, metaphorically speaking, on the Patreon. That's another reason I wanted to screen grab, is I wanted to do a little tour of my actual work. I don't know why I'm pointing up here like you have a tab of my work open, but I was actually on my screen pointing at here. Where is it? That there, yep, there it is. I was actually pointing at my damn. Anyway, Patreon tab. Lost it again. Doesn't matter. I do a lot of performative approaches of zero, and I get a lot of pushback on Twitter. We're like, well, you didn't say anything. All you did was say, well, this can't be, that can't be, that can't be. And I know it annoys the shit out of Tom that all I can do is Kabbalah word salad. Yeah. And so I do a lot of performative Kabbalah word salad, and it confuses people. And so what William James has just said is that you cannot reach truth. You can't reach a positive supposition negatively. The addition, he continues, to a given concrete piece of it, that is experience. Uh, the addition to a given concrete piece of it, other set of experiences in connection with which severally it uses, its use or function may be of two different kinds. That's a really confusing sentence, and I'm just going to move past it. The paint will also serve here as an illustration. In a pot and a paint shop, along with other paints, it serves in its entirety as so much saleable matter. Spread on a canvas with other paints around it, it represents, on the contrary, a feature and a picture, and performs a spiritual function. And I don't know whether he's doing it on purpose, and I don't know if my reading of Adam Smith and Wealth of Nations is complete enough to make this comment, but it does very much feel like he's trying to relate this section of his essay to your familiarity with Wealth of Nations. Just so, I maintain, says William James, does a given undivided portion of experience, taken in one context of associates, play the part of a knower of a state of mind, of consciousness, while in a different context, the same undivided bit of experience plays the part of a thing known, of an objective content. In a word, in one group, it figures as a thought, and another group as a thing. And since it can figure in both groups simultaneously, we have every right to speak of it as subjective and objective both at once. And right here, what he's doing right now is he's talking about something entirely adjacent and entirely tangential of the argument of consciousness. And what he's doing is he is directly attacking 19th century relativism and subjectivism by saying that those cannot even begin to approach the mind and how the mind works. Because if you break everything into a fractal million, billion, 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 billion pieces of itself, you can never arrive at monism. He is bullshitting for sure, but I don't think William James, I think William James so thoroughly answered the question that everybody who's talking about consciousness is an asshole in the first paragraph, that now he's doing a lot of what I do, which is just wasting your time. uh, you wanted to know my opinion. Well, my opinion is that you're wasting your time. So I'm literally going to get paid to waste your time. And I do actually really like. You hate it, Swole? I really like this. That's great. I love that you guys have such a negative reaction to this. His language is old-timey, but I'm not trying to apologize or defend it. His language is old-timey and it is really difficult to parse, but I really think that's on purpose. I think he's intentionally thumbing his nose at Scotland in the 1900s or the 1800s. I really think that's what's happening, because he goes on to say the dualism connoted by such double-barrel terms as experience, phenomenon, datum, Vorfindung, terms which in philosophy at any rate tend more and more to replace the single-barreled terms of thought and thing. That dualism, I say, is still preserved in this account, but reinterpreted so that instead of being mysterious and elusive, it becomes verifiable and concrete. You're right. The language is completely dense. That's so. Oh, yeah, okay. I now I'm watching the live chat to see you two argue it out. That's so funny. I could watch that as a passive observer. He's I don't think he's being obtuse. Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. Kerm says that his language isn't obtuse. The ghost bullshitter plagiarizing him is, and so I was a little bit misunderstanding them, but I do understand that now. Um, I like his language, but I absolutely understand if listening to this, reading it yourself, you're like, this doesn't mean anything. He's taking on a lot of philosophical arguments that were happening tangential to this, where people in the 19th century, the 1800s and the 1700s, the 1700s was really bad for this. Um, uh, the 1700s was really bad for this, but the 1800s got these ideas of syllogism, that you could just assume first principles, and then you could bounce from your first principles to monizing or simplifying this fractal universe that you'd given yourself by your syllogisms. That in whatever way that was plucking on one string of the string theory, and now that does what I'm talking about does predate string theory, but string theory came out of this idea that if we could just pluck on one, we could examine it. And then if we could understand the way it works, we could move to plucking others. And so what he's doing is one at a time, he's just going through and he's just cutting all of the syllogistic arguments that relativism and especially what is it, subjectivism, the idea that there's even a conversation in subject object subjective objective, that there's even a conversation there that's not measuring angels on the pens of needles. He's just saying that it's not even worth talking about, and I don't disagree with him to a certain degree. When I listen to professional philosophers, or when I listen to people who are smarter than me I am, talk about subjectivity and objectivity and universals, especially when people get to universals, I go, okay, well, I'm not thinking that hard. I'm just not willing to think that hard, because if you can't provide for me a universal to pick apart, I'm not going to be the first person to come up with one. People don't understand that universal's argument settled on God, and for good reason. That people spent whole careers and got exactly nowhere on that conversation in the Middle Ages, when they had time to do what I'm doing in a much more serious way. Serious is not the word I should have used. Serious is the correct word, though. I spend a lot of time engaging with people on Twitter in a way that they absolutely would not have. Uh, I don't even mean, but people like Isaac Newton, they would lock themselves up in small rooms with just a candle and what they were writing or what they were reading or what they were working on, to the point that their friends would have to actually break the door down to remind them to eat. Like, I don't have that. Serious isn't the word I should have used. Obsessive and compulsive are the words I should have used. I'm not that obsessive and compulsive. Ancient people who were obsessed and compelled to answer the question, ancient and pre-modern, they were compelled to answer the question of what is a single thing which is universal. And universal in this context doesn't mean uh, I'm going to read that one out loud in a moment. It doesn't mean spanning the whole universe. Uh, Somebody feed me what that Latin word means, but it means effectively always true. What Swole just said is that's what he and my group chat on Twitter did. My friends, the fireside, and all of the people that I daily acquaint myself with, that you might call me unserious for doing. All of those people did absolutely break my door down. Absolutely, they did break my door down. I was an irascible, hateful, arrogant prick before I met Swole, and he'll be the first person to tell you that. I was in so much agony and anger at all times, and I would like to continue to the end of this paragraph, and then I think we've done a good job of discussing William James for a bit. I would like to go on to my next secret special reading for you. He says, "It is an affair of relations. It falls outside, not inside, the single experience considered, and can always be particularized and defined." That's what I want you to know, is that if you spend the time working on these universals, you will always be able to particularize something about them. And if you work hard enough, you can always particularize how you're wrong. That's the point of science. And that's what he's saying here. That's not just the point of science, it's the point of critical thinking. We can always uh we can always, if we take the time to consider our experiences, or any had experience, and this is what's important to me, and this next paragraph is what inspired Rob, Jane Roberts' husband, to get her to write. It can always be particularized and defined. And what that means is that Jane Roberts' kind of mushy, I don't know what I feel, but I kind of don't like him, feelings toward William James and his ghost can always be particularized and defined. So as we continue to look forward, what I am going to be doing today to get myself the perseverance, the emotional wherewithal necessary to persevere through what is for me very real adversity in reading her work, I'm going to remember that we can particularize her pathology and what's going on in her mind, and we can define it, even if we're not allowed to, even if it does put us at very real risk of lawsuit, because the very real thing we can do, and that people won't just hang out for this pitch long enough for me to say it, is we can defend ourselves with this. Even as crazy people, we can defend ourselves with this stuff. He moves on to say, and this is going to be a paragraph I don't like, and that's why I want to read it. "The entering wedge for this more concrete way of understanding the dualism was fashioned by Locke," that is John Locke, I believe, "when he made the word idea stand indifferently for thing and thought, and by Berkeley when he said that what common sense means by realities is exactly what the philosopher means by ideas." And okay, so I should have read the whole paragraph before I opined on it. I agree with that. I agree with that sentiment. I don't know about the specific. Neither Locke nor Berkeley thought his truth out into perfect clearness, but it seems to me that the conception I am defending does little more than consistently carry out the pragmatic method which they were first to use. And that I object to. He innovated pragmatism, and what he's doing is being a bad historian. And this is called the historian's fallacy. He's taking the future that he wants and he's projecting it backward and saying that the people that he liked in the past already had the idea. And now I'm not telling you because I actually don't believe what I'm about to say. Patently don't believe what I'm about to say. But people will tell you that that idea is sourced to Deuteronomy, and they're wrong. But what they mean is that the folklore around Deuteronomy is that it was found in the rubble of the first temple when the Israeli people were allowed back from exile. And I'm willing to believe it was there, in fact, because it sounds Iron Age. And so it sounds contemporary to the pre-Torah editing that happened in during the exile period. So it actually does sound, when I read it, now that could be the editing and that could be the translation into English, but when I read it and I just imagine what words they're translating from and the language style they're translating from, having read none of it in Hebrew, um, it reads very much like the other Iron Age literature happening at the time. And that could be very, very, very good translation. I could just be very ignorant and very stupid. But my point, my point remains that he's trying to say that he has these scriptures and Locke and Berkeley that predate him and which already had pragmatism in them, which is what the Israelis were saying that Deuteronomy was. Oh, look, here's this wisdom book that already had the ideas that we came to in exile here before we got here. And so modern people go, well, that couldn't have happened because so many modern people or near modern people have retro-dicted faiths into their scriptures, let's say, like Jane Roberts is retro-dicting William James as a ghost, in my opinion, allegedly. Um, and so it could have never happened the first time, but I don't see any reason why it couldn't have happened for the first time at Deuteronomy, because the rediscovery of the Emerald Tablets, the discoveries of Zoroaster, the rediscovery of the what was the other? Oh, the rediscovery of the um Greek mythic system that is Homer and Hesiod. All of that post dates Deuteronomy's discovery. So that's not nothing to me. Even if Deuteronomy went, oh well, everybody else is rediscovering a lost history, we have to do it too. They did it first, and that can't mean nothing. Is all I want to say about that. As I now transition beautifully, like I've been thinking about this for 24 hours, meditating on it. Not 24 hours, whatever, 19 hours, meditating on how I would do this. That's why I keep starting to tell you that I think, oh, I'm not going to do this. And then I realize, oh, I am going to do this. And then not effectively telling that story because I am a shaggy dog philosopher and you're just going to have to cope. What I want to do is I want to read for you one of my very, 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 very most favorite myths. And I would like to begin with another plagiaristic or approaching plagiaristic. So again, fair use. Read this author, read his work. It's brilliant and amazing. And I'm going to finish selling it, and then I'm going to ask you for an Amazon wish list item that I would very much like to have my hands on, but I will have to hope there's a Kindle copy for now. First, I would like to show you, this is one of my very most favorite texts that was ever composed, and it's one of my, there is a part of me, there is a very real part of me who believes that this book survived history so it could reach my hands. There was a part of my life when I was that sad and I was that alone and I needed something to hold on to that tightly that I very, very much know that it isn't, but I do believe that the reason this random book, and it is it's random, survived the fires and the indifference of history is so it would reach my hands. I believe that, and now I'm going to read it into a microphone as often as I can give myself an excuse. This particular story specifically, but I have a surprise second story that I want to read for you because I want you thinking crazy thoughts by the time we get to Jane Roberts. I want you thinking like an absolute crazy person, or at least witnessing what a crazy person thinks like. The book that we're reading is The Metamorphoses of Antoninus Liberalis. Let's see if I can get that without a glare. This is the translation by Francis. I believe that's pronounced Caloria. It's probably Celoria. Um, the Metamorphoses of Antoninus Liberalis is one of history's most, to me, fascinating and interesting. Actually, hyphenate those two words because I say actually a lot, and we use interesting incorrectly, but actually interesting artifacts. Antoninus Liberalis was nobody. He was just hey, Swole, thanks for being here. Thanks for joining me, person who just joined. Have a great night, Swole. I'm really glad that you got to hear me wax poetic about the Bible. It makes me feel good that you don't tell me that I'm wrong in the chat. So, and hello again, Tax. It's great to see you. Metaphorically speaking. Um, uh, So we're going to read from Antoninus Liberalis's Metamorphosion. And this book is interesting, and it's actually interesting and rare and cool because, first of all, the Latin and Greek copies almost didn't survive to history. They almost didn't make it to me, and they only made it to the, what's that called? The college, the not college, the Library of Congress. Almost didn't make it to the Library of Congress, except somebody, I think Thomas Jefferson himself, had maybe the only copy of it and gave it to a friend who died, and his family didn't know what to do with it, so they just gave it to the Library of Congress. It almost did not survive to history. It's called The Metamorphosion of Antoninus Liberalis. It was composed either in the second or the nope, the third or the fourth centuries AD, and it's very interesting because it's a contemporary composition to Ovid's Metamorphosion, and Ovid's Metamorphosion is another one of those things that absolutely should not have survived to modernity. It just shouldn't have survived the fires of history. Ovid's Metamorphosion, Ovid in general, should not have survived to history. The emperor of Rome in his life, Augustine, hated his guts. That is Ovid. August, I said Augustine, Augustus, Octavius cum Augustus, hated Ovid, hated his guts. And so, if I don't have copies of Ovid, but if there's a common theme in what I do, is I work my way up to talking about Jane Robertson. Hello, new joiner. Um, if there's a theme, it's defiance. It's not just defiance of the popular milieu. It's not just defiance of pop culture. It's not just defiance of pop government. It's just defiance of whatever. And so I read for you William James because William James is being defiant of the Scottish school of philosophy. He's being defiant of the German schools of philosophy, the French schools, the British schools. When he says we can be pragmatic, he's saying we can act like Americans all over the world. That was his actual philosophy. And now I want to go on to Antoninus, because Antoninus Liberalis is a really interesting guy. He wasn't a poet. Ovid was a poet in direct oppositional defiance of the empire itself, not just the cult of the emperor, not just the person of the emperor, but the idea of empire. He was decidedly a hippie, to do that thing that I said you can't do and move ideas back in time. Hey, welcome for the join. Um, Kerm Life just said that hatred for Ovid isn't rare, that lots of people hate Ovid. He's not one of them, but he knows a lot of Ovid haters, and there's a good reason. He was very erotic. He was very much take your girl to the what's that place called? The Colosseum, just to get a hand job in public. Like, he was very much that kind of person, but he was very much attacking the mores of Rome, because he was saying, like I am doing in my Shaggy Dog manner, he was saying that the mores of Rome were a lie. And so he was honest. I like Ovid because he was honest. I like Antoninus Liberalis, a contemporary of Ovid, for those two who have just joined us in the mid segue of trying to introduce one of my very favorite, just personal favorite books. Antoninus Liberalis was a grammarian. He had no business writing this book. There was absolutely no reason that a grammarian should have written a collection of obscure poems and myths. And so, yes, Kerm says that Ovid was a sort of Roman Andrew Tate, and that's exactly what Ovid was. That's a brilliant. I'm not as good as he is at um, those. That's exactly right. Um, Ovid is honest, and Andrew Tate's not honest. He see, the difference is that they're the same person in that way. Ovid was just open about being abusive of women, and Andrew Tate likes to make it like there's some masculine virtue in being abusive of women and people under your power. Antoninus Liberalis, Ovid wrote Metamorphosion. Metamorphosion is a collection of poems about transformations, and those transformations are highly erotic and They're highly erotic, and they tend to be women in grave sexual danger. Um, that is not what Antoninus Liberalis wrote. It's not, in fact, what I'm going to read for you. It's actually what I'm about to read for you is 180 degrees the inverse of that. Even though it does very much end similarly, because they're the same people telling the same stories. I'm going to read for you the entirety of Mr. Francis Saloria's introduction. And I can see that people are coming in and out as I find my way to introducing this. I like Kerm, and I really like Kerm's commentary, and I would really like to encourage all of you, if you have something to say it to me, and let's make this as dialoginous as possible under my setup conditions. And if you're in and out of that, I value that too. You have a life and time, and I'm getting at this slowly because I've given myself 5 hours and 2 hours worth of material. So let's chew on it. I gave you that. Okay. I'm going to read his introduction in the book, his commentary, because I think it's good, and I think that I'm not as good as he is at being succinct. And then I'm going to explain to you why it matters that a grammarian wrote these things at all, why he collected these, and why it matters to me, and why I think it's so neat. Lamia or Sybaris. This story is basically a hero tale where a fearful monster about to eat a human sacrifice is slain. Here, the killing of Lamia is made to seem absurdly easy for the youthful hero. The only humanly dramatic touch is perhaps when he impulsively snatches the sacrificial chaplets from the victim and puts them on his own head and marches on to the monster's cave. This tale of a rescue by a passing hero errant. If you're familiar with the Arthur canon, a hero errant is effectively a knight errant in uh, Greek garb. So the not quite a toga, the thing that was like a sash, and then like the skirt that you see Hercules wear in the young Hercules wear in the Disney show. This tale of a rescue by a passing hero errant is not unique. If one recalls the story of Perseus and Andromeda, or that of St. George and the Dragon, some writers have likened the tale to that of Euthymus the boxer, who killed a monstrous goat at Temesa, rescuing thereby the beautiful maiden who became his wife. This is a tale well told in the sixth book of the famous Guide to Greece by Pausanias. At first, it might not seem to have much to do with the Sybaris story. But as Pausanias continues chattily, he refers to a copy of an old painting he has seen, which is unexpectedly linked to the Lamia Sybaris story. Greek painters frequently labeled their paintings liberally and helpfully. Accordingly, this painting showed a river captioned as the Calabris, a city called Temesa, a spring called Lyca, and the dusky monster whose name was given as Lycus or Lycus or Lucas. I don't know how that Y is pronounced because I'm not sure which Greek character is being used. That character is confusing to learn how they use that word. And then if you learn any Welsh whatsoever, Y's are highly confusing because they're like grunted U's. Language is confusing when there are only two alphabet systems, and those alphabet systems weren't invented for the languages that are using them. Sorry. Accordingly, this painting showed a river captioned as the Calabris, a city called Temesa, a spring called Lyca, and the dusky monster whose name was given as Lycus. These wolfish names, are reinforced by the wolf skin worn by the demonic spirit. And now this is interesting. I wanted to get to this in a different podcast, but we'll get to it here, and somebody can ask me to expand on it later, or I'll remember to expand on it in a few days. But I visited back my I'm always visiting back my Norse and Celtic and Central Germanic archaeology as far as religion. I really want to know what they believed and what they thought, because we get a lot of bullshit. And then not only do we get a lot of bullshit, but the things that Julius Caesar specifically said are taken out of context to dismiss that he said anything at all. And I find that highly objectionable from a scholastic standpoint, but I'm also unwilling to learn how to read Greek or Latin in a timely enough manner to translate and then insist on the truthiness to use a 2007 meme of what he was saying. But Wolf. He says wolfish names here, and that's not irrelevant because I was talking with a friend again on Twitter, again in group chat. You're just going to have to get on my level and get around me um, for these to not be uninteresting to you when I do it. My point is, she was asking me about werewolves, where werewolves come from, not irrelevant to my persona, and me being me and knowing how you are you, unless I put it in an edited video, no one is going to like this sentence. Well, werewolves are blank. I know they are blank because blank, and this is the only thing they can be, period. People don't like that. So I left it up to her to reverse engineer to her own conclusion whether she liked what I've arrived at in my research. My point is, I came after that conversation to wolves and somebody explaining that just the wolf image in the Nordic language, the word wolf also means evil. So, in the same way that apple and left also mean evil and bad in Latin, wolf just means evil in the Nordic language. So, when he says here this wolfish language, these wolfish names are reinforced by the wolf skin worn by the demonic spirit. What the author here is making very clear to you, because this is much older, and it's academic. You can tell it's academic by the way it's printed. He's making it clear to you in your meta knowledge that you're not allowed to talk about that these people were absolutely adjacent to the Celtic people and probably the Nordic people. Absolutely, they were adjacent to them. They share words, they share cognates, and they share a language system, Indo-European. And what is the caption for the youth? Sybaris, which is the alternative name of the monster, and Antoninus. One feels tempted to invent a pseudo-Platonic myth about motifs wandering everywhere looking for names and other trappings of reality to put on. And what he means here is something that we can't go into, but it is actually a really interesting sentence. And I should have a highlighter at I'll do that some other day. He continues, even if we could return in a time machine to interview Pausanias and Antoninus Liberalis, we might find that they had each only a limited view of the ramifications of Greek myths and tales. Pausanias can be seen to furnish a closer parallel for the Lamia Sibyrth story. At Thespiae in Boeotia, a dragon was committing outrages on the city. Zeus ordained that a youth should be chosen by lot annually to be handed over to the monster. Cleostratus was chosen, but his lover Menestratus offered to go instead. He put on a bronze breastplate made of scales, which had each a barbed hook sticking out. He nobly let the dragon gobble him up, feeling certain that the barbed scales would be fatally indigestible for the dragon. Pausanias gives no details of the final result, but piously gives all the credit to Zeus, who was given a bronze statue and a title of a word that I can't pronounce, Saltes, Savior. He's given the title Savior. And this is what I'm doing with this story. The reason I'm telling you this story is because there's a lot of savior mythology wrapped up in the Lamia myths, and dragons are interesting because they were woman magic, and that's not me being sexist. That's ancient people being sexist from a 1960s worldview perspective. They didn't think of it as sexist. They thought of it as gendered utility, that men could not communicate with the gods in the same way as women because men don't regularly bleed. That's literally what it was about. And that's okay. It's actually okay. Somebody didn't like that little rant. What I want to tell you, and it's interesting, is that Lamia is attached backward in time to Inanna, who is attached backward in time to Ishtar. I probably got those two names backward, and that doesn't matter. She is attached sideways to Lilith. This Lamia story is a Lilith story. What Jane Roberts is doing is Lamia or Lilith magic. That's not irrelevant, and it's actually highly interesting. I wish those 6 people that had popped in and popped back out had let me get all the way to the end of this. You all, everybody, what's Liliths? What are werewolves? What are these things? They're very real things. And horror fiction and crazy people are a great opportunity to show how just fixating on one idea, I can talk to ghosts, really does open up no, I'm sorry, it really does close off your ability to have a meaningfully useful worldview, which is very interesting because what William James is telling Jane Roberts and speaking directly to Jane Roberts and not to me as the audience is that she needs to open her worldview back up, which is very interesting. It's very interesting if you've been paying attention. I'm sorry, I'm moving around so much. It's very interesting if you've been paying attention to my Patreon work, because my very most recent piece, I said maybe what you need to do as a human being is close your mind off a little bit. Maybe in listening to people like Jane Roberts tell you to open your mind, like listening to people like William James telling you that you can choose your worldview, listening to people like Friedrich Nietzsche and Jordan Peterson tell you that you can choose and make and decide for yourself. I'm sorry, I'm pointing at you. That you have the ability to decide what is and what is not moral for yourself. These people telling you all this, they're fucking lying to you, but they're part of a very long tradition that Kerm is just desperately waiting for me to call sophism. And I'm so so reticent to talk about sophists and to call people sophists into a mic, because that is the very worst, in my opinion. That is the very worst. Uh, what's the word when you offend somebody? That you can say to a human being is to call them a sophist. So I'm cagey with that word, but absolutely it's sophism. What they're doing is they're giving you very sophisticated arguments, so you will pay them a huge amount of money for labor that they didn't actually do. And so in the inverse of that, hello, new person that's joining me and anybody in the future, what I'm trying to show you is the difference of that. What actual philosophical engagement and study looks like. Don't forget to tip your philosopher. I'm sorry that it's your responsibility. It should be the state's. You're absolutely right with that. And we're going to work on that as I get my voice louder. We are. Not the state being responsible for me, but the state being more invested in not selecting for, certainly not picking out, but yes, Kerm used sophist all the time. Not selecting for and not picking out, but identifying messianic figures in our civilization is something that we need to be doing, and it's something I also want you thinking about with Jane, because if Jane Roberts believes that she was a messianic figure, the woman in this story that I'm about to read for you, hello new listener, watcher, is relevant. And we're going to jump right in. There was a lot more that I wanted to say about that commentary, but I'm going to end up reading this story and this commentary a million times to you. It's one of my very favorite things, and so I'll catch it over the decades. This is from chapter 8, titled Lamia or Sybaris. Sybaris is a dragon. Lamia is not. Lamia at the time was depicted as a lioness, not even half lion. Now she's depicted as a half snake. But at the time, she was a lioness, just a lion. And then Sybaris is a dragon. And the Greeks by this time did have the conception of the dragon as basically your Komodo, your Gila monster. That started a gigantic lizard, very big, very, very, very big, is how they understood dragons. And so this story is interesting. I keep losing people because I'm not actually reading it, but you need to know this stuff. By the foothills of Parnassus, you don't need to know where that is. Towards the south, you do need to know, however, that Boeotia is where Hesiod came from. There is a mountain called Curfus, lying near Crisa. Inside it, there is to this day a huge cave in which lived a great and prodigious beast. Some call it Lamia, though others called it Sybaris. Every day this monster would issue forth, snatching flocks in the fields, as well as people. The inhabitants of Delphi had for some time been considered immigration, and they asked the oracle to what land they should immigrate. The god told them that they would be delivered from this menace if they remained and were willing to abandon by the cave a youth chosen from the citizens. And so we can know that this is pretty common stuff. Because we can think of, is it Theseus and the Minotaur, Perseus? We can think of the labyrinth, and we can know that leaving children at places or giving youths to other cities was a pretty common form of, let's say, population manipulation in the late no in the Iron Age of the Greek mainland, not Turkey, not the islands, but the mainland, that it was a pretty normal and common thing to do. They did, as the story continues, as the god told them. By lot, Alcanaeus, son of Diomus and Meganera, was chosen. Only son of his father, he possessed beauty in both appearance and the nature of his character. And if you remember me telling you either last time or the time before that or whatever, in the Nordic tradition, if you could be an ugly person, like you could be physically, sexually unattractive, but because you were so intelligent, because you were so moral, because you were so blank, you were considered beautiful, and that beauty radiated out of you and made you sexually attractive. By that same token, Moses, when he comes down off Mount, let's say Horeb, I'm going to be wrong, with the tablets, after he sees God the second time with the second tablets, he comes down and his face literally glows to the point that he has to start wearing the full face turban situation, and he actually just stops coming out of his tent altogether because his hands also glowed. And it basically, what I'm telling you is that in this magical tradition, what you got was what I call void herpes, but the way they imagine it is as a sort of anti, or even like a spiritual anti leprosy, where instead of your skin dying and rotting away, it becomes actually self luminous because of your righteousness. This is something that's attributed to Zoroaster centuries later. I shouldn't say centuries later. Let's just say Moses was in the 1200s, maybe, probably, BC, and Zoroaster, the earliest we can find Zoroaster is the 550s, people. Anyway, that's for a completely different subject. I don't remember what I was talking anymore. Oh, he's glowing. In Greece, I don't remember how beauty of that nature works in the Middle East and in Anatolia, and it doesn't matter because we need to get back to Greece. And the way it worked in Greece was that the more sexually attractive you were, the more, as a man, buff and tall and lean and cut and micropenised you were, the more beautiful you were. And then women didn't really get radiance. Do you understand? And so being tall and lean and cut and sexually attractive to other men was in its own right a virtue. The priests crowned Alconius. I'm never going to say that name right. It's Alcyoneus, and I am just never going to get those vowels. Alcyoneus. That's how it's spelled. Alcyoneus. Goodness gracious. And led him toward the cave of Sybaris. By divine inspiration, Euryborus, son of Euphemus, a descendant of the river Axius, a young man but brave, happened to be coming from Coretus and encountered the youth as he was being led forward. The first time I read this story, I read it into a Twitter space, and I did a really bad job. But the first time I read it as a human being, I was in the back office of a United Dairy Farmers, and I did not appreciate that this was a traveling hero. And so I don't know that he meant to be a traveling hero. I think that there may have been, and I don't need to be so couched in my language. I know for a fact there was a system of people being allowed to travel and expect hospitality in foreign lands, and I don't see any reason why the motivation of our character here, Curtis, when he's about to do what he does, he sees this guy being led to human sacrifice, and he's just a wanderer, and he's young, and he's handsome, and he's strong, and he's good looking. There, in his mind, there's no reason why he shouldn't go in this person's place and do what he is ultimately about to do, because he's not from a place. And if we think about hospitality, and we think about what empathy and sympathy actually call on us to do in actual ethical situations, rather than just do the trolley problem here, Corellius does the practical, pragmatic, if you like, Greek thing, what Alexander is going to do many centuries after this story was written. Stricken by love, this is Corytus toward our friend Alcyonius, stricken for love by him and asking why they were so preceding, Corytus thought it dreadful not to defend Alcyoneus to the utmost and just allow the youth to perish wretchedly. He's a young person. He says, "Ooh, that guy's really attractive. Well, maybe we could be buddies if, there's no reason that I, with this sword, shouldn't go and defend him from whatever he's going to do." And this is a trope in the Indo-European, the Celtic, and then really the Britannic, Breton tradition, the fool as hero, the person who really doesn't know enough to consent to what they're doing, overcoming at impossible and ridiculous and even stupid odds. And it's in our mythology because of literally people like Cyrus, who just didn't know that they were punching out the Persian Empire, or people like Alexander, who just didn't know better than to do what he did. He literally didn't know any better than to go knock. It's so funny that it's always the Persians. You don't know what you're doing when you knock out the Persians. And there's a lesson there. There's a real lesson there that lasted thousands and thousands and thousands of years. That's too many thousands of years. I meant to say hundreds, and then I got excited. Tearing off the chaplets from Alcyoneus, that is, Corytus, placed them on his own head and gave orders that he himself should be led forward instead of the youth. As soon as the priest had led him up to the cavern, he ran in and hauled out Sybaris from her hair, that could be by her hair, carrying her into the open and hurling her from the crags. So what he does is he's like, "What you said? What's going to happen?" And he doesn't even bother with his sword, because if he had bothered with his sword, we've got Gorgon stuff, we've got Medusa stuff, and we've got non-consensual sex stuff happening. So what he does is he just goes in there. He's like, "You're going to do what to who?" And he takes her by the hair and throws her off a mountain. Tumbling down, she struck her head against the footings of Crisa. Because of this wound, she faded from sight. From that rock sprang a fountain, and the locals call it Sybaris. And the Locrians founded a city in Italy called Sybaris after her. And my point in reading this is, even if I were in life to have taken Jane Roberts by the hair and thrown her from a mountain, and thrown all her work down in the mountain with her, someone would insist on remembering her, no matter how evil she was. Think about that for a moment. I'm going to look into the camera for a moment. I'm going to ask you to think about that. Think about it like an evil female archetype, but an historical personage. The first person I think of is Nancy Pelosi. The second person I think of is Elizabeth Bathory. But you can make a list that goes on and on and on. What's that song from the end of was it called Lamb Chop? This is the song that never ends. It just goes on and on and on, my friends. Some people started singing it not knowing where it goes or what it was, but they'll continue singing it forever just because this is the song that never ends. That's called liberal progressivism, and it's generally feminism. Whenever you look, I got really annoyed. I almost said Kara Cooney. That's the wrong name. Oh, I should have looked her name up before I said her name. It might be Kara Cooney, the author of shit. Now it's all gone from my head. I'm going to have to do this because I actually really respect this woman, and I got hugely annoyed with her historian's fallacy during this work. Give me. I'm so sorry to do this. Kara Cooney. I actually nailed it, and I had the book right. The Woman Who Would Be King. I got in my head and let myself second guess myself. That book got under my skin for reasons that I can't talk about because I don't remember them. She really got on my nerves because she wants to historian's fallacy. Madame Blavatsky. can never remember these women's names, and I really need to, because not being able to remember names makes it sound like I haven't actually read their works, and I haven't read Wollstonecraft. I haven't Mary Wollstonecraft. I haven't read her work, but I have read her daughter's work and Frankenstein, and I know about as much as there is to know about her daughter and how shitty her life was because of how abusive her mother was, because her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, and she's dead and fuck her estate, um, was a whore and a bitch and spent her life chasing dick. Um, I'm allowed to say all those things. And then, what's her name? Simone de Beauvoir ruined the world. And you can find proof of that in a book that I'll read for you someday called 10 Books That Rule the World, or that ruined the world, I think is what it's called. And my point is that the song that never ends is women doing evil shit when they have even a modicum of power over another human life. And I'm not just saying that as a person who has been abused cyclically over and over and over by women, not only in corporate power and romantic power, but also my mother and grandmothers. This is a very real phenomenon that the bad girls don't make history milieu. The whole idea encourages women to be lamias. Now, we are going to be talking about the feminist Edgar Cayce. So I do absolutely have to talk about feminism. I absolutely have to show off that I wear cartoon graphic tees, and you can. And how do I want to put this? Because it's a sensitive, tender thing to say. Liberalism is black magic. Feminism is black magic. Liberalism and feminism are married at the hip to do black magic. What Jane Roberts is her name. What Jane Roberts is doing in this book is practicing black magic. Now, black and white in magical terms are idiom that I should absolutely not use because woke is black magic and you are confused about what is what. I also shouldn't use left and right hand terminology when I'm speaking about magic, paths, ways, ideologies, thoughts, these things, because similar to William James, but annoyed with William James as I am, you cannot reduce things to monism. You cannot reduce things to dualism. So I don't like to say left, right, because that implies a middle, which implies a union of the two, which is the correct path. And I don't, that's also not true. That was a lot of words to say very little, and I appreciate that. My point is that necromancy means using magical means, that is ritual, etc. Ritual, drugs is usually what magic means. You combine ritual and drugs and you get magic. But will is something that came into magic late, and I am not prepared to speak about those three things into a camera for free. That is going to require life-changing wealth for me to speak into a camera about, and I'm not sorry for that. Why have I brought it up? Because Jane Roberts is doing necromancy. By any name, it's necromancy. And look, necro sounds terrible because you're familiar with fantasy literature, you're familiar with Tolkien saying the necromancer is like the big bad guy in The Hobbit, right? Well, here's the thing. He's being subtle. The necromancers were the bad guys in European history. He just wasn't allowed to talk about it. He had the source material. He just wasn't allowed to talk about it because remember when he was an academic? We've talked about that a lot in this, a lot in this series. All right. I am prepared to move on to part 3 at hour and a half. Man, I am killing it. I'm actually going to run out of material for you, which was sort of the plan. Okay, so we're going to move on to part 3 of this piece, which is another poem, another poetry reading. Um, and then we're going to move right back into being bored by reading Jane Roberts until I just can't take it enough, or I can't take it anymore. And then we'll see what happens. Maybe I start episode 2 and I just do something else, or maybe we go live and maybe we just hang out and chit chat on Twitter or something. I do have to get up early in the morning, so maybe I just call this one like a good day's hard work when we're done. When I'm done is what I mean. Okay, the second poem that I would like to read for you, the second song that I would like to read for you is William Shatner again, still from the Has Been record from 2004. And this one is called It Hasn't Happened Yet. Tonally, musically, this song is very different from Common People. Common People is a sort of triumphantly defiant, almost love ballad. Um, and I like that a lot. I like those juxtapositions a great deal. This is a very different thing. And I highly recommend, because I'm not pretentious or emotionally prepared yet, emotionally vulnerable enough yet to actually perform for you. I'll do some dramatic readings, but actual performance where I go to the part. I mean, I made myself cry for you earlier today, so it's not like I haven't been honest. I was crossing the snowfields in front of the Capitol building. It was Christmas and I was alone. Strange city, strangers for friends, and I was broke. As the carillon sang its song, I dreamt of success. I would be the best. I would make my folks proud. I'd be happy. It hasn't happened yet. Yes, there are nods in my directions, claps of hands, the knowing smile, but still. I'm scared again. Foot slipped, pebbles fall, and so did I. Almost. Oh my. Oh, Yosemite, the great big wall, or the big gray wall. Fear of falling. Where to put my foot next? Fear of failure. I'm afraid I'm going to fall. Be at one with the mountain. I whispered in the air. Fear of falling, feel failure, feel losing my hair. Falling. When is the mountain scaled? When do I feel I haven't failed? I've got to get it together, man. It hasn't happened yet. And that, I think, you should finish on your own time. And I highly recommend you wear noise canceling over your headphones, because it's just absolutely incredible. Um, it's a huge inspiration to me, and it's very much, he does this really cool trick. His audio engineer, but the team that made that record do this really cool trick, um, where his voice pans around as he whispers, pans around the headphones. It they pitch shift it in really interesting ways. The audio engineering is just really interesting, and I highly recommend it. Um, Even if that didn't record properly. Um, I'm going to move on in a moment. I got myself emotional again. Um, it hasn't happened yet. Not for me. Not the piece. I need, when I take these moments to just be calm, I need to stop being insecure about dead airspace. There's a certain amount of we're allowed to meditate here, and there's a certain amount of space that I need to give you to talk to me. So, if what we're talking about is mental health, and the similarities between me and Jane Roberts they're not irrelevant to you, I'm sure. I've got two ideas competing for my mouth here. There is a truism that we don't really talk about or appreciate, except in the religious context, specifically of actually the Middle East. And that is, in fact, that you fight most fiercely with the things that are most immediately in your environment. So, what I mean when I say that we typically only talk about this in the context of religion and specifically the Middle East, what we're talking about is why Islam hates Judaism so much, or why the Nazis hated Judaism so much, or why people typically what we're doing is we're explaining why people hate Jews so much. Now, I spent a lot of words last year, 2023, in this space, and this is going to happen more frequently. I need to relax into this and stop feeling so compelled to get it all done. This needs to be kind of a little bit more chill and relaxed. I'm never going to earn. I'm never going to earn the loyalty of random passersby by rushing through this. So this is going to happen. Sorry that I'm not more sorry. So I don't remember what I was saying, and that's just something that we're gonna have to cope with too. I've explained that I have brain damage. And that's just a thing that happens. In mid sentence, it's trauma, and that's what I'm trying to talk to you about. I'm trying to talk to you about the trauma headspace and what happens when you have trauma, and I'm trying to explain to you why I'm pathological about dead air. I'm not pathological about dead air because I'm worried you're gonna get bored. I'm not pathological about dead air because I'm trying to be funny, because I'm trying to be entertaining, because I'm even trying to be particularly educational. Um, Radio personalities need to be concerned with dead air because they have time slots. YouTubers, your big YouTube channels, they have to be concerned with dead air because they have to be concerned with run times being consistent because they're trying to emulate television and radio and their time slot management. I don't remember how I was going to differentiate myself. And that's just something that's kind of the point is I'm not that. I'm not them. Whether this is more or less intimate is one thing, but I'm trying to relax and I'm trying to show you how to meditate. And these are things that I need to talk about more concisely in those kind of time slotted 7 to 21 minute long videos in a way that makes sense for people to click in and go, who is this guy? You know, I get it. Very much I understand. I am pathological about dead airspace because I was severely emotionally and physically abused as a child. When you grow up in severe emotional abuse, especially people shouting at you and calling you mean names, when you get any amount of attention for speaking at all, you just want to press that button infinitely. And so one thing that I learned to do as a young person until 2023 was just not speak. Just don't speak. Don't draw the attention onto myself because I'm going to do this thing that I keep doing to you. Or when I realize that I'm talking to real people about these things that are watching, and two of them I probably don't even know. I have no way of being acquainted with them at all. I panic in a very real way. And what that means is I feel a complex, and what that means is a system or a the way they would say it in science is a high entropy, I believe. I believe they would say a high entropy system of emotions. And so what that means is that my brain and my body are flooded with chemicals that I don't know how to process. And then they all try, when I'm doing this, they all try to come out at the same time. I pathologize silence because I don't know what you're looking at if I'm not speaking. I don't know what you're thinking about if I'm not speaking. And so like there I have friends who want to call me on the phone, for instance, and I don't have any problem with listening, but I don't want to speak because I don't want you thinking when I can't see your face and it's a real conversation and it really matters. Or I don't want you to know that I'm distracted by not really paying attention because by not really being invested in the phone call, for example. And so These are relevant to reading Jane Roberts, to hate reading anything. How do you force yourself through something that makes you deeply uncomfortable? Not just deeply uncomfortable, which you can recognize, identify, and isolate as an attack against your ego system, your very brain nature. What do you do with that? And so for 36 years of my life, before I read Andrew Perrin, what I said was, well, you just put it down. I explained this in an essay on the Patreon. You just put it down. And from 3 to 4, I agree with you leaving. That's the thing. Is when, oh, hey, welcome back if you're back. What I see is when people come in, they come out, is exactly what I just said. I agree with you leaving. You say, okay, well that's either too much, that's not interesting, that's I'm looking for blah blah. I get it. I get it. Again, I get it. I get the in out. I get it. Not for me. No thanks. Okay. You know, I don't know how to pivot off of that. I don't have anything specific to say. I wanted to let myself not be crying, emotional as I move into Jane Roberts because um, I want to performatively demonstrate what she's talking about. If she's at all like me, what she has is very little intellectual control over when she stimulates particular emotions. And now if she's let's say if she's on any kind of mood altering drug, whether it be opiates, barbiturates, any kind of what they used to call at the time hallucinogen, whether it be a psychedelic or it be as mild in that category as THC is, whatever it be, if she's on any kind of mind or mood altering substance, alcohol even, um, she's going to have atypical responses to emotion. And if she already has an underlying post traumatic stress disorder network, if her default mode network is the big psychological language terminology for what I'm talking about, if her default mode network is already traumatized, and this is what we need to talk about. We need to talk about ages. And I didn't know how to segue into this. And so it's been an ugly and it's been a difficult segue because I don't always remember what I tell myself I need to think about for you guys in public. We need to talk about age. I was listening to a highly intelligent, I think his name was actually Ramakrishnan, spelled with an A at the end. I will never remember his first name, but he was a brilliant speaker for the the Royal Institute, I believe, in the UK, and he was doing did a great. She was awful. The interviewer was awful, but he did a great dialogue about his work in molecular biology and aging. And so one of my friends is very interested in the singularity, and I learned what that is recently. So maybe he'll jump in the live chat someday, and he can poke me to talk about that as related to Jane Roberts and what she's doing with William James and William James's ghost. Moreover, he talked about what aging is, and he gave a really good definition that I think is really interesting. And I think that it would be really interesting to put out here in the context of Jane Roberts is not getting younger in 1978. And in 1970 is when longevity science became a real thing. I've talked in every single one of these about how 1970 is your cutoff for pre-industrial medicine and post-industrial medicine. 1970 is your cutoff from when medicine became real and really good at keeping people alive longer, and he does a really good job of making that distinction. If I were smart and if I loved you more than what I do, I would put these links in the descriptions. What I need is a secretary. Moving off of that poorly, his definition of aging is really interesting. And I, being a philosopher, this is listening to him was my downtime. I do that for fun while I play video games before I go to bed. What I like to do, I opened it this way. This is what I opened when nobody else was here, so I'm actually bringing this full circle at the hour 39. That's a 99-minute mark. I'm good. You guys, you just don't really appreciate how good I actually am at this. Aging is damage over time. It's accrued damage over time. And I thought, that's brilliant, because that's what I predicted. I keep telling you, and then forgetting to bring it home this time, because I was, too busy patting myself on the back to actually get the ball across the goal line. That also is relevant for your life. Learn from me. Don't be like me. Um, be more like me. Uh, Aging, as damage over time is really interesting, because I keep talking about that, about how and in a disorganized way, about how you can really tell and you can really understand what people are and what people are like, and you can psychoanalyze people based on when in their life their damage was. Okay, well, when did you suffer this damage, and how much have you changed since the damage? When did the damage? Oh, okay. And so, like, the earlier damage happens, the more likely it is to become psychopathological to the point that it's uncurable, because this is just person. This is at if it happened before 3, we're talking about personality. That's you. You are fundamentally whatever that damage moment was. And so I've written essays, and I've talked a lot about how most of what feminism is, and here we go. I guess what I've been doing is badly. I'm going to listen back to this someday and go, Jesus Christ, you're so traumatized. Calm down. Feminism broadly is an insistence that every girl's first trauma has to be legislated, that everybody has to know about it. It's this broad internalization of the, um, oh, I can't remember her name now. I had it and it's gone. Um, fuck. Brunelleschi, I think is her, Artemisia Brunelleschi. Feminism is broadly, as I'm transitioning into actually reading from Jane Roberts again, which is traumatic to me and I don't enjoy it. It's broadly it's okay. So you know how, you may not know how, this isn't common knowledge, and people don't like it when white guys like me talk about it, but Jewish school, Hebrew school, teaches you to be convinced that everyone who didn't go to Hebrew school is a secret Nazi. That's a fact. So, like, that is true. Feminism teaches you that every man is a sexual criminal, and that everything that happens to you has to be taken in front of a jury of your peers. That's a broad internalization of the Artemisia Junaleschi, might be her name. Artemisia Brunelleschi, something like that. She was a Renaissance painter. And yeah, I know 2 people popped in for that. 2 people immediately popped out of that. No, 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 no. Don't want anything to do with that. My point is that college girls know about this stuff, and that Jane Robertson, wanting to maintain an audience of college girls, because you almost can't be a feminist without being a college graduate, has to talk about this stuff, and she has to have William James support it. So because we haven't seen it yet, what I'm doing is predicting not necessarily what we're going to find today, but what we are going to find in this book. And I think I have said nothing at all. I'm aware of that, but I think I've said everything that I want to say as we move. And 109, somebody divide 109 by 70. That's 32. I got 3 minutes more if I really wanted to break it up into 7-minute chunks. But that would be pretentious. Oh my God, wouldn't that be so pretentious if I actually did this, pointing out every time 7 minutes had passed and I had a segue to the next thing for you? I would be the most unsufferable dickhead in the whole universe. I will eventually stop doing that. I just have to. People don't know. They don't know what they don't know, and we don't know why we like podcasts. Thank you, Kerm. I've got up in my head and in my, because I made myself cry, so I'm all up in my head about my emotions. Like, I'm afraid to be sad or afraid to be emotionally affected by something beautiful. I'll push through it and get angry here in a moment. Oh, you left over that? I'm allowed to be honest about my emotions, guys. Just because I'm a man doesn't mean that I'm also not allowed to have emotions. Um, If this book is telling us anything, it's that uh, Jane Roberts deeply believed that William James actually thought that, and would have said more on the subject if he weren't verboten from doing so, because of the the reckless and suicidal desire to get into World War One, I think, is what she's trying to argue. And in that regard, she is making the argument of her time, and it is an argument that I was raised to believe is the right one. So she's kind of my cognitive dissonance, is what's kind of happening here. Is all of this emotional buildup and workup, all of this that I'm going through is very much what it feels like to engage in your cognitive dissonance. And it's something that none of us likes to do. And what I'm trying to do, to say it to myself and to say it to you, is I'm trying to show you that it's okay. It is scary and it's fucking horrible, but you come out okay. You really do. I'm alive. I didn't die in the night over it. And that can't be nothing, right? Okay, so we're jumping a few days ahead in time, not in the text. I'm not skipping pages. We're going from Monday morning, January 31st, in our last read, to Wednesday morning, January 2nd. So that is a couple of days. Good job. 1977. Eventually, I will stop calling the year that we're in when I'm talking about this 1978, just because that's when the book was published. For those of you who haven't watched part one, I keep doing that because in my head I'm thinking about Andrea Perrin. And I very much apologize for these hiccups. I have had just enough cream that my lactose intolerance is going to turn into the hiccups. Jane tells us directly from her voice in a parenthetical. I awaked groggily this morning at 2:50 a.m. Realizing, I should probably put that in a higher pitch voice, realizing that I was getting James lovely long sentences. I sat on the side of the bed and took down 2 segments. Here's the thing I have already. Why does she write in so many sentence fragments? You can't see it here, but realizing that I was getting James, there's a dash, and not just the short dash that you get if in your word processor you hit space dash space, it goes and makes it a little bit bigger. It's the em dash of where you go letter dash dash space and you get the that means that the it basically means a period, but it means a broken sentence. She writes in a lot of those. I'm not going to show you every time, but man, I do too. And she makes me feel like, oh man, maybe you're not as good at, maybe you're not as stylistic as you think you are. Shags, you can't answer the question in real time or in the comments of why she writes in the manner that she does. That's just how I asked. That's how I voiced my frustration. I don't like it that she does this. She writes in too many sentence fragments. I sat on the side of the bed and took down 2 segments. After the first 2 paragraphs, I lay back down and snuggled beneath the covers. Then the material started up again. In the morning, as I typed up what I had written down in bed, I kept getting new interconnecting material. Obviously, I'd missed some fragments and photographs, and as I typed, they were filled in. I underlined them just to preserve the distinction. She did it there, and that, oh man, I gave myself a tickle in my throat again. She does it there again. To end that sentence, that paragraph rather, I underlined them just to preserve the distinction. That could be a comma or it could be no punctuation. I underlined them just to assert. Why does she need the emphasis on the? I just don't understand her prosaic style, and I don't need to because I don't think she was trying to. But when she speaks in her voice, like I would be very sure to be distinct in my voice. But maybe I've talked a lot, and look, I have to do these for people who don't know and don't understand what I'm doing. I have to break in frequently because she may be alive, she may have an estate, and I may be plagiarizing her, I may be stealing her work, and I don't want to be doing that. I am very much am in the interest of public education, using this as literary criticism, not criticism of the woman, criticism of the woman's work, and criticism in general of automatically written work, because I write it and I want you to know how to critique me ultimately, is what this is about. I'm teaching you how to teach me how to be better at teaching you how to teach me better. It's this is a mutual bridge building. I don't even know what I'm talking anymore. So we're going to go back to her speaking through William James' voice. I tried to prove, in fact, the sweet products of my intuitions as they appeared to my creative imagination. And now, what I want for you is to not remember what the fuck he was talking about last time. So if you're picking up for the first time and you don't know what he was talking about last time, I decidedly don't want you to, because he, once again, has picked up as a ghost in her perspective right in the middle of a paragraph. Now, William James, as we have now known, is bad about that, making his paragraphs start in the middle of sentences. But this is a bit extreme, in my opinion. I lost somebody for that. I really thought that would be what somebody would want to hear. Um, sorry, I tried to prove, in fact, the sweet products of my intuitions as they appear to my creative imagination. For such intimations of immorality or immortality, that's in scare quotes for some reason, did indeed carry me above my intellect's dry grounds. This is underlined, by providing soaring concepts and emotions that freed me momentarily from my habitual patterns of sentiment and thought. Done underlining. Okay, so she doesn't like that she spent so much time. She doesn't like that she spent so much time talking about his emotions either. And Tax has given us a good comment that I would like to read for you. Um, I don't know Tax's gender identity, so they, for the time being, say, last night, I wonder if she was trying to sound like he would sound, or if she felt like she was translating the meaning of what he tried to say through her, and she had to use her own vocabulary. And that's something that has been on my mind today. That's very exactly well said. I tried to approach saying that, and you are all always going to be able to say it better than I do. That's right. That's I think that's exactly what she's demonstrating here, is that she realized that, oh, I might have put a little bit too much of me in that last one and trying to have, because let me go to my experience, because I don't know her experience. Let me go to my experience with automatic writing. When I sit down to write and I want to enter my trance state, the way that I do it is I say, okay, Rob, tell me about a moment when you felt this specific emotion that this memory makes me feel. And then Rob goes, la la la, word salad, as he works himself into understanding what the emotion is. And then I usually delete that, because that part is just that's the AI imaginations, whatever is going on in the brain. It's sort of like cranking that old timey wheel to get the engine going, right? It takes a little bit of elbow grease to get the ghost going. And so you keep seeing that. I keep reading that in these first paragraphs, that she has to really crank him up, but it really seems like she never gets him going. It really seems like she never quite gets past feeling like she has to translate him into her own words, and then those become long retellings. That is what it feels like with Rob. When I just try to sit down and write what Rob and I have talked about, and I don't do that anymore because it's bad. Um, I just wonder if she lacks this self-critical conversation. I wonder if, because Rob, her husband, is so intimately involved in her productive schedule, I wonder if she lacks even the ability to have this critical thought without it being just perceived as blanket self-doubt and self-critical self-talk. I said self a lot. Tax says that elbow grease kind of is the vibe I get from her musings about the paintings before. That was all her trying to extrapolate something deeper. Absolutely. It's like, this is a weirdly specific and personal analogy, so forgive me if you can't, if this doesn't bring it home to you. But I have a pack of post-it notes in here in my room with me, irrelevant to the story. It had a sweepstakes offer on the bottom, and it was a scratch off thing, but I couldn't get the scratch off to scratch off. It just, nothing would happen, and then it was tearing the paper. And so this is a funny story, because I just went, oh, some ad exec is just a dumbass and lost his job. But Now, what you're saying, that she was trying really hard to extrapolate, I read that in my head. At first, I read that exfoliate before I said it out loud, and that's what it feels like she's very much trying to do. It feels very much like she's got a loofah, and she's trying to scrub her brain to get inside to the William James that's in her brain. I absolutely think you're right about that. James goes on, but once I tried to prove these inner intimations by evidence and deduction, once I tried to bring them into the realm of science, I began an often thankless task. For neither intuitions nor intellect were really ever satisfied. And we did read him say something very similar. So she might be cheating, and because she said she hadn't read any of his work, she could just rest on the laurel of, well, I went into it without having read it, and then now she's reading it piecemeal as she goes along. She may not. She would deny the claim, so I can't make the claim. But there's no way there's no way to falsify it, so there's no way to take it off the table as possible. I became critical of emotional comprehensions, James continues, or underlined rousing flights of fancy, no longer underlined, that I knew could not be objectively proven. Where earlier I gave my imagination full sweep with no thought that such immortal urgings could have a base in fact, but kept such religious sentiments aloft from the kind of scrutiny I gave other more mundane subjects. Therefore, my poetical inner knowledge held its validity when I judged it in its own framework. But once I cast it in the light of science, the conflict began. I want to say that James was actually an accomplished poet. I could be wrong about that. I might be remembering her saying that she learned that he was an accomplished amateur painter, but I actually do think he was an accomplished poet. I think we could look. I don't know why I don't want to look, but I'm not going to look. We could. I'm not going to. But I do think he was actually a poet. I do feel like I remember that. No longer then could I accept my intuition's comfort, for a religious or spiritual belief became only a premise in its intellectual translation, and the soul's rich drama fell apart when reassembled into the geometry of mind. For that geometry required a definite series of steps and methods before I would give it its QED to hypotheses for which the intuitions needed no such graded synthesis. I just hate that whole sentence. I don't know what it means, and I'm moving on. Underlined. Indeed, the inner structures of such intuitive securities, however strongly felt, seem to dissolve in toto. In toto? I don't know why she spelled it like that. I think she means the Spanish on todo, ENTODO. I think she means in total, unless that's actually how it's written in Latin. Whenever they were tampered with intellectually, still underlined, as if they were composed of the finest yet flimsiest materials, or else of ingredients solid enough in their native realms that could not, however, be transferred to the physical world. Now, that's the end of the underlined section. She uses one of those hyphen breaks right there, the EM dashes. And my thing is, I just read 8 paragraphs to you, all said and done, over the last over the 2 readings of uh, does intellect and actually exist, and or does consciousness actually exist? And I don't remember a single EM dash. I don't remember a single space dash, whatever the lesser dash is called. I don't remember him using any of those. And so if what we're going to do is say, well, this can't possibly be real because she's not using his grammatic stylings, then it can't possibly be real. She's not using his stylings. But I don't think that's what I'm trying to say at all. It might end up being, but that's not where I'm at right now. One part of me thought, of course, faith cannot stand the light of reason. The scientist must keep his beliefs separate from his world of facts and not seek to prove, in the laboratory or otherwise, those unprovable promptings of the soul. Let them be delegated to art or religion or philosophy, disciplines which do not have to set their theories to such rigors. Here's the thing. He was a philosopher. I don't remember him ever referring to himself as a scientist, and he referred to other philosophers in his work. Underlined. On the other hand, I felt compelled to check faith's, no longer underlined, comprehensions and to bring all hidden aspects of consciousness into the democratic light of day, into the new world of progress and technology,
where I hope the Spirit's proven knowledge might then be used as an extra impetus in man's objective search for the answers to reality, EM dash, and also to serve to temper the unscrupulous use of knowledge itself for selfish gain. Okay, well now I have a better feel for why she uses these M dashes. It very much, I don't know if they're called M or EM, whatever. It very much seems like she's using these dashes when she knows that what she's interjecting is in fact not necessary. She doesn't need to say this part. It's almost, I think that pretentious writers, and I think that good writers, and I think there is that fine line of genius and insanity between the two, uh, both insist on adding pieces to their literature that are meant to be edited out by a good editor, that insisting on a bad line that restates the line before it and a piece that doesn't need to be bloated in purple. I think that pretentious and great authors both insist on that so they can have an argument about something in their work with their editor. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I don't think the pretentious writer knows that it's annoying. I think the good writer does it so you're forced to engage with the fact that they are the one writing it. I do not think she does it in a way that makes me glad to engage with sentences that should be clipped off. This is underlined for a very long time, a paragraph and a half. For if we could mine the Earth's resources, dig deep into the planet's core, and bring forth ore and minerals, why should we not also mine the resources of the soul in like manner, bringing to the surface of men's minds those precious gems of faith and hope that lay, I thought, beneath the surface of the mind? Ironic and beautiful that Tax predicted this. Now she knows that she's trying to get elbow grease her way below the surface of her mind, and she's telling us. Very good, very well done, Tax. You're 2 days ahead of where she was in her own writing. Good job. Continuing with the underline. So I began to search for such intuitive knowings and spiritual intimations wherever they could be found. In the churches or seance rooms, the reports of dreamers, seeking out the stories of respectable and eccentric alike. And this ends the underline section. And that's true. He did do that. So now I'm wondering if she's not underlining these sections because she read a biography or she actually did write his work, and she's underlining them because she knows this is true. Yet the integrity of my own emotional comprehension suffered, nor could I take comfort any longer from them. Moreover, my intuitions were scandalized to discover their knowledge judged by the often tawdry activities of many seance rooms, faith reduced to magicians' tricks and husky, whispered promptings as apparitions paraded in gauzy gowns. How could man's grave and loftiest spiritual proposals come to such a fate, underlined, that their validity would be considered dependent upon such maudlin sentimentality and babblings? And underline, and I've been reading for a while, and I don't know what that question means. So I'm going to read the next one. How could those sparkling prisms of faith be turned into cheap baubles under the investigation of logic and the disciplines of control? What does that mean? I'm going to back up to the not underlined section of that previous paragraph. Yet the integrity of my own emotional comprehensions suffered. Okay, so what he's saying is that he went to these seance rooms, he was in his experimental laboratory, he was in therapy sessions, he was in uh smoking rooms with the world's rich men, he was in ballrooms with the world's rich women, he was in dressing those are called, oh, what, I don't think they're called dressing rooms, I forgot, drawing rooms with the world's elite. And all it did was make him less and less familiar with the emotions he was feeling. Is that what I described about my emotions just 20 minutes ago? I may understand what she's saying. I do not understand why she chose to say it in these words, other than that she is half awake, like literally half awake, not euphemistically. Moreover, continuing in the from that previous paragraph, excuse me. Moreover, my intuitions were scandal. Oh my goodness. I am sorry. My emotions. Oh my goodness. My intuitions were scandalized to discover their knowledge judged by the often tawdry activities of many seance rooms. Faith reduced to magician's tricks and husky whispered promptings as apparitions paraded in gauzy gowns. And then here she's saying that watching these women do what? The Lamia thing that we just described in the poem, that watching these women parade around in the semi nude, acting a fool, made him question his own theism. That doesn't sound like he went to his grave promoting pragmatism as a relationship with God. So I don't believe, unless what? Is she still working her way toward his death? She's okay. Okay, so let's give her like Kerm, forgive me. Let's just give her a lot of credit. Let's give her a lot of credit she hasn't earned. Let's just make the grading curve really steep, and let's give her the benefit of the doubt for a second. If I've been thinking about this from the standpoint that the William James who's speaking to us now is speaking to us from the perspective of a dead man talking about the last moment of his life, a live life, and how he thought, who he was the moment before the switch went off, she's all over the place. Yes, Kerm, just stay with me, buddy. She's all over the place. If I am thinking about this from that perspective, it's impossible to pin her down. But if you think about it from the perspective that what she's saying is no, no, no. I've got this ghost who's talking to me in general about a specific moments in his life because he no longer has a brain with which to remember specific timelines of his life. I could absolutely see someone not named Kerm Life, not named Tax, not named Miss Jen if she shows up tonight, not any of the three of you whom I'm unfamiliar with, and absolutely feel free to say hello. I will give you a hello and I'll shout your name out. Um, if you don't want me to, I won't. I won't do that too. Uh, I'm sorry. I confused. I got myself all mixed up. I can absolutely understand how this would work. Is my point. If what I told you last time, if what you want to learn from me is how to make the real money, the big money, the money that everybody is chasing after, act like this. Because if you can make your argument this relative, it's impossible to dismiss. It's impossible to falsify, because simultaneously she can be going, well, no, he doesn't have a brain, so he's just generalizing his 30s, his 40s, his 20s, his 50s, whatever decade he died in, all of it all in one melange pot that he can't differentiate from. And if she's read even a little bit of Intellect and Consciousness, he's already told us that her argument is valid because what she's doing is saying that the pigment is just mixed up individual pigments. So what she's doing is she's mixing up all of the decades of his life, all of the individual opinions he may or may not have ever had, and she's saying that she's just maybe not skilled enough of a medium to parse them all out, which, if in the medieval, I criticized her for this in part one. If in the medieval style she had insisted on the apology saying that she is in fact not good enough to do this, I would give her the credit she's asking for right now. This is what's agitating me about these people, is if they would go to the effort to be humble and not rob me, I would give them the fucking benefit of the doubt they want. I would call it fiction, and I would just tune out and I would just read the rest of this for pleasure. But because she's already set this up as an actual thing that's happened, that's actually scientifically valid and should affect my worldview, I have to take a weed weeder, a weed, how do you say that? Weed whacker, weed eater to it. I have no choice now, because now she's assaulting me. I get offended, and I'm allowed that. And thanks for sticking around through that rant. I feel good about that. So now back into the paragraph that I don't understand. How could man's grave and loftiest spiritual proposals come to such a fate, underlined, that their validity would be considered dependent upon such maudlin sentimentality and babblings. Oh, he's actually being critical. That's why I didn't understand it. She just called 20th century, early 20th century, late 19th century. She just called her competitors maudlin. Maudlin is like um basically striptease, right? Somebody tell me that I'm wrong about that in the comments. Hello. I believe that what she just said is that I believe she just called the seance rooms of the 1800s and the early 1900s uh, brothels. I think that's what she just said. I very much I think that's what she's just said, and that's them's fighting words. She's coming out swinging against seances and her own religion in this chapter, and that's very interesting. She doesn't strike me as somebody who's used to being self-critical, and this whole thing seems to have been highly self-critical of her. So what in her that would be interesting. She did take 2 days off between, right? So it would be very interesting if is in that 2 days the negative self-talk that we were describing before, if that actually showed up in the writing as negative, not necessarily negative, but just self-critical thoughts. Uh, if that's how she, because she's a positive self-talk kind of person. She's a power of positive thinking kind of person. Whether she predicted that particular book or not, that's very interesting if that's what's happening. What she's doing is she's building pathos. She knows that people like me are going to want to give her as much credit as possible, and so she is absolutely leaning into getting as many bonus points on this test as possible. How come those sparkling prisms of faith, he continues on, how could those sparkling prisms of faith be turned into cheap baubles under the investigation of logic and the disciplines of control? And I don't know what that means, and I don't understand the melancholy, but that is the end of that day's output. And it sounds like she got about as tired of being self-critical as I get of her belief claims. And then we got the next day, good for her. No, later that day, even good for her. Wednesday afternoon, February 12th, 1977. The poet could rejoice in his intuitive revelations and give them enduring and protective clothing in his verse. Intuitions and intellect, in this case, wedded, joined in symbolic sacrament. Wordless intimations fleshed out in cadenced verse, so that the poet, like a spiritual banqueter, oh boy, literally made me yawn. Sorry. So that the poet, like a spiritual banqueter, could have his poetic cake and eat it too. M- Marie Antoinette was the 1800s. That's right. Right. That has to be right because the French Revolution was the 1790s, the early 1800s. That has to be right. Okay, he could have said that. No one asks him for the recipe or ingredients. But cast the same intuitive data into the terms of usual reasoning, and the cake melts. The frosting is a gooey mess, and the impatient guest gets a mouthful of disappointment. Why are we talking so much about cakes? And what? I'm really having a hard time. This is like water off a duck's back on my brain right now. I'm really having a hard time understanding what she's trying to say. And again, this is at the beginning of the chapter, and she did this last time too. But it does feel like it's in the middle of the day. You'd think, okay, whatever. I've already said that she does that. It takes her time to elbow grease into this, right? It takes her time to get the car winded up. So is faith then such a tenuous concoction that it fell at the slightest touch? Faith in what? What? Open the door to the unconscious, where the delicious loaves of inner sustenance bake, and lo and behold, we have only the cheapest of bread, soggy and unappetizing. Why the question mark? Her punctuation on Wednesday afternoon is confusing. Often I felt such to be the case, and so my melancholy grew as I examined the products said to come from that creative fire. Not until after my death did I really realize that such unconscious servings took the shape of the psyche in which they were baked. That however the ingredients were stirred, or however fresh they were originally, they flowed into the contours of each individual psyche And though like bread they might rise, so must they level out to fit the mind's container. She has an EM dash in all three of these paragraphs. And so that literally means she's working into it. That's what it, yes. Yes, you're right, Kerm, and that's the appropriate way. I don't want to condescend to you. I want the future when they read your messages. He said that the reason that I'm reacting to it the way that I am, and it's making me so mad, and I want to give it credit because I want to just be able to relax into it, and I want to just be able to enjoy it, and I want it to be saying things that I believe and that I like and that I want to participate in. He says the reason I feel like that, but I can't, and the reason it makes me so angry is because it's bullshit. He calls me Cujo. You're welcome to call me Cujo too. I won't call myself that. It's weird to call yourself by a nickname that someone else gave you. So I call myself by a nickname I gave me because that's not. I'm so dumb. Tax. I asked for the definition of maudlin because I'm dumb, and Tax actually went and got it. I thank you in a very real way. Thank you. I did not anticipate that showing up in the chat. Says that maudlin means teary, easily moved to tears, excited to tears, excessively sentimental, weak and silly, or, and then the second definition following, that's bananas. Okay, I've never heard that. That's one of those 1970s words, drunk or somewhat drunk, fuddled, given to drunkenness. That's one of those 1970s words that got completely wrong by the 1980s, isn't it? I really thought maudlin had to do with the nudity side of vaudeville. That's really funny that I was so wrong. Not that the word itself is funny. I like the things I get wrong tend to be very funny to me. Yeah, okay. Kerm Life says again that the part of why I get so upset about this is that what she's doing is she's getting me in my dog aspect to chase my tail because this is a game of fetch to her. And yeah, what I want is for her to throw me a stick, throw me the damn stick, stop spinning me around in circles chasing it. And he's absolutely, yeah, he's psychoanalyzing me. Absolutely right about that. That's exactly what's going on here. To continue on, that container was far from pure or uncontaminated. That is the body in which his psyche was held. Um, uh, sorry. And that container was far from pure or uncontaminated, but held also the invisible residue of all the mind's more prosaic meals, messy concoctions in which even the finest spices would be lost and overpowered. And I want to actually, I don't know if I'm giving her kudos or I'm giving her props or not, but choosing the word psyche is very interesting because it's not one that he used in this context. But the Sike, the Suke, isn't that how that's pronounced? That was something approaching the union of the mind soul. That was the thing that actually went to the afterlife. So that she's using that word means she's at least got a modicum of familiarity with the Greek myths in the Greek language. And so good for her for that. The analogy is not too far off the mark with its connotations of taste and tastelessness, for even an excellent painting, gaudily framed, is the worst off. Is it? Who notices the frame to that degree except an obsessive compulsive? I actually, I don't know if I want Kerm to answer that or if I want anybody in the chat or anybody in the comments to actually answer that question. That's what those eyes meant. I don't know if I actually want the answer to the question who besides an obsessive compulsive cares about the frame of someone else's painting. That requires a degree of sickness that I don't want to try to occupy in my own mind. I think that's why I don't want the answer. It is perhaps miraculous in itself that the products of the intuitions continue to manifest themselves in spite of the shoddy containers that men provide for their storage or display. I don't I don't like I don't actually like how well I'm predicting the conversation that she's going to have because What he's trying to say here is that you can have an ugly body and a brilliant mind. And he needs to say that because I haven't shown you a picture of her body yet. I told myself that the search for extraordinary merit or revelation or evidence of man's great validity was, in its way, undemocratic. Why do you think that should be? That he told himself that the search for extraordinary merit or evidence of man's greater validity was undemocratic. I don't know why it should be democratic, but I don't know why he should need to tell himself that as he approaches death. Anyway, he continues to say that he cast aspersions on, and then here he uses scare quotes, the common man, since nowhere in my fellows could I really perceive even a glimpse of such enduring quality. And here I would like to defend the man. He did not do that, in fact. Pragmatism and the meaning of truth was him going bare knuckles against the entire Scottish school um, for the common man. His pragmatism was very much about how common people have the exact same faculties that the Scottish philosophers did. Absolutely the same. The common man has. I have the exact same faculties that any of you watching this have with university uh, undergrads or PhDs, all the way up through multiple PhDs. I have the same human capacity you do. You just have more direct mentorship than I have, and you have more certification. I would almost said certitude, but you have more certification than I do. And the etymological link of certification and certitude is interesting to me right now, but I'm not exploring it. But this isn't true. I'm going to read that sentence again because it's not true. Um, he says, I told myself that the search for extraordinary merit or revelation or evidence of man's greater validity was, in its way, undemocratic, and cast aspersions on the common man, since nowhere in my fellows could I really perceive even a glimpse of such enduring quality. Nor, when I was in such a mood, did the objective condition of the world serve to reassure me. That's not how he talks about himself in his other work, and I understand that this isn't really him. I get that. I'm not supposed to say that. I'm supposed to remind you of that to leave it open to the possibility that it's just her writing this. But that is incongruous with his work. Was I alone then, blind to a spirituality and superior caliber constantly spoken about so glibly by others, and to which I myself gave only lip service? As inconceivable as this seemed, I gave the matter considerable thought. Here's the thing. Even if that's true, she's talking about a 1970s neo-Nazi superiority complex that didn't exist outside of Germany, and with which in Does Consciousness Exist? We already did today ourselves demonstrate that uh, William James contradicted this in his life, went to his death contradicting this. So if he changed his mind in death, I would really like it if instead of the way she's writing this, she had chosen to write it when I said things such as, like, common people are great and awesome and have all of the same human faculties as everybody else. What I meant was, I wish she had done it that way. I wish she had bothered to take the time to do it properly, to read the books, which is what we're doing here. As inconceivable as this seemed, I gave the matter considerable thought. In the world at large, in social conditions and private experience, I did recognize a great energy and tried to take pleasure in the idea that I was too discriminating and disapproving. He did talk a lot about energy stuff. Believing perhaps that the innocence of others was distorted in the light of my own melancholy, and taking comfort in the thought that excellence of mind and spirit existed, though my own temperament hid it from my eyes. And here now I can talk about it because now I know the words. I've been trying to tell you that Jane Roberts was more than likely traumatized by the early part of the CIA psychic spy program. I think someone told Jane Roberts that she was going to be Messiah in either a cult or for the very secret spy program. We talked about this yesterday. Kerm gave me the name Stargate. Um, as I'm reading this, I can't stop thinking about that. And now that's my problem because I'm broken in that regard. But the things she's saying remind me of the things that the guys who were saying that a Messiah was coming before 1980 believed. And so she was either badly damaged by these kind of people, which is not impossible, or I think she thinks she's Jesus at this point. I think what she thinks she's doing is, if not being Jesus, she's being Mary Magdalene, telling the world that Jesus has risen. Because if you know the stories, it was the Marys, not any of the disciples. The disciples all went about their lives. All of the books have the Marys basically holding their hand, like their feet, begging them to stay and believe them. That's correct. This Tax asks, this whole thing is her writing as if she's channeling him. Correct. That's correct. Yeah. This whole thing, it's an automatic. It's automatically written. That's the lingo, the jargon, if you like. But yes, she's channeling him by earlier. She's trying to separate herself from that language, but that is what's happening. So I thought to perceive, even in the shoddiest of performances, that glimpse of high mindedness and creative virtue that must be contained within. Yet all the while I went dissatisfied, not realizing that only the proper blend of intuitions and intellect can provide true vision or understanding, or hope to act as a lens through which man can reflect the inner fires that provide the continuing life of the world. That's Zoroastrianism, and she's mixing her metaphors a lot. Creative abilities, as I know now, give the most reliable and highest evidence of those qualities that absolve man from his own shortcomings and intrinsically lift him above even his own experience of himself into a spiritual validity that outlives his life and death alike. And yeah, this is decidedly, now we're decidedly at Stargate, because this is the LSD experiments. She's talking about the CIA funded LSD experiments. I'm not sure. I'm also not unconvinced that she wasn't involved in that. I used a lot of double negatives there. What I mean to say is she reads like she either read that stuff, talked to those guys, or was intimately involved. And if she was intimately involved, it was as a test subject, and they badly hurt her. They badly damaged her. And if they badly damaged her, everything that we're reading deserves a grain of sympathy along with a healthy serving of salt. And by salt, I mean for her as a victim. I do mean that. We deserve, when we get angry, and if we can prove that she's this way because someone badly hurt her, we can start to channel our anger toward the people who hurt her, and then we can find their work and we can start to attack their work without qualifying that we're just trying to be literary critics. We can actually qualify it as we're fighting the devil because they hurt someone. Do you understand the difference in the kinds of literary criticism that we're dealing in? I'm saying that less for the five of you who are here with me. Thank God, I love you. And more for the audience in the future who is going to find reasons to hate this. There are eventually going to be people who show up just to say mean shit to me, and so I need to get out in front of it so the people that want to understand why have a place to be safe. We're almost done with this chapter, and then I want a smoke break and I need to get hydrated again. My throat is starting to get dry. The creative abilities, as I know now, give the most reliable and highest evidence of those qualities that absolve man from his own shortcomings and intrinsically lift him above even his own experience of himself into a spiritual validity that outlives life and death alike. And William James did write and talk like this. He was very interested in that. He was very much opposed to the higher thought movement. And yes. Yeah. Kerm calls it complete fuckery, what I'm talking about. And he's right. This whole thing is complete fuckery. It really is. I want to give it a lot of credit because I want to be given the same amount of credit. I know that I'm broken. I know that I'm probably crazy, but I would still like the same amount of human suspension of disbelief, or which we call sympathy. I don't need your empathy. You'll never feel like me because my feelings are busted, but you can at least think like me. Such faculties represent the mental equivalent of the animal's prime innocence and at the same time are cast in the light of God's most treasured characteristic, his creativity, from which all worlds emerge. Um, this this isn't bad. It's not maybe good, but she was interested in Einstein and relativity. I don't think by 1910 James could have been, but this whether it works or not, it's not incongruous with what people believe. Um, for instance, creationist Christians would read this passage and they would say, absolutely, totally. The term God is the simplest one to use here, though it is interchangeable with many others, all referring to a point in our thinking where comprehension stops. We can no longer even mentally verbalize what we feel. And what she's saying here is what became popular in the 70s among scientific skeptics, probably after this book was written, frankly, probably in the 80s. But what they call it is the God of the gaps. So what she's saying is that God is whatever is in the gap between the known and the unknown. Um, I'm sorry, the known and the unknowable. So, what that means is we've been talking a lot about unknowables and giving people credit for even trying to engage in the unknowable, because even if they don't deserve a medal, they deserve a pat on the back and an attaboy for doing it as a human endeavor. And I've lost the thread of what I'm saying because I don't want to give her credit. I would like to take as much of it for myself as I can, to be honest. The world then suggest that source out of which intuitions and intellect each spring, and in which they are so invisibly, securely, and intimately couched that they and their source are separate and united at once. And I hate that too much to read it again. And I think what William is trying to say here is that I no, I hate it too much. We're not doing it. These creative abilities in their finest performances defy time and space, lift man out of the limited context of intellect or emotion alone, and forge both into a higher faculty in which experience is more evidential than any demonstrable fact, and in which facts themselves are seen to be like wobbly weeds stuck only momentarily in ever shifting sands on the shores of eternity. That was such a weirdly mixed metaphor at the end. You can throw the whole paragraph away, but wait a second. These creative abilities, which creative abilities? The creative abilities as I know now, but we never get an example of a creative ability. We don't get a definition of creative. We don't get a definition of creativity. We don't get a definition of create. Now, William James is an American philosopher by the very title of the book we're reading. Why doesn't he define what he's saying? Why does he pivot from a definitionless truth claim to a definition of God back to expounding on the definitionless truth claim? That's not how logic works. What I can't do is say this THC vape is a different shade of green on my screen than it is in my hand. Okay, well, that's too distracting. I forgot my whole argument. Oh, okay. This vape is brown. What I can't do is say this vape is brown. Cups are containers in which people put drinks. This vape tastes good. That's not how a logical progression works in any way. In any way. There's no A plus C equals D. Fine, you can skip letters in the alphabet to no. Even if that were possible logically, and I'm not sure it is, I don't actually know the mathematics of logic because I think that is sophist wizardry, and I refuse to engage in it, except ironically in my essays on my Patreon. Do subscribe to the Patreon. I'm fucking hilarious. Yeah, that was the end of that. I don't think I had a. I know that I had a. I know that I just EM dashed myself and forgot what I was saying, and that's the point. I'm much funnier and much more cogent on the page because I can read my previous sentence, which is what she's doing. She's realizing, oh, I'm no longer cogent in chapter. Oh, that's what I meant. Rephrase. Get uncogent. Don't know what I'm saying anymore. Do you understand how that works? And instead of going back and taking all of this and then, like a good writer would do, because look, let's just be real between you and me, okay? This has an epilogue in it. It also has an index of terms, okay? And that index of terms ends on page 241, all right? So this book itself required 243, let's say 246 pages of paper to make. 246 pages of paper to make. And if what she had done is gone back and taken every 4 or 5 or 6 paragraphs, every day's work of material, and then further condensed that down to the simplest possible how do you not expulsion, but the simplest possible way of saying expression, the simplest possible way of expressing what she's saying. If she had done that, this would be a half or a third of the length. It would be unpublishable. She couldn't send it to her publisher. And so I absolutely have to remind you every time that all this smells of to me is somebody filling up manuscript pages because they need the advance bad. The kinds of people who need advances that bad are people who are supporting an abusive partner or who are themselves abusing themselves with something, whether it be an abusive partner or a substance, whatever. They're living an abusive life. If you're that desperate for big chunks of money, big advances are like a small advance from a publisher is $15,000. They're trying to make sure that you can live for the year so that you can do something like write the next one on time, idiot. So we don't have to give you an advance so you can live off the royalties like a real human boy. Besides the point, sort of. Let's get back because I don't remember what the point was. And we're almost done with this chapter. And I do want to take a break. These creative abilities in their finest performances defy time and space, lift man out of the limited context of intellect or emotion alone, and forge both into a higher faculty in which experience is more evidential than any demonstrable fact. And that runs entirely contrary to the exact passage I read to you today. Thank God I chose to do that. That runs exactly 180 degrees contrary to what William James wrote in section 2 of what we read of does consciousness exist today. She says the higher that when I just have to read the whole. Damn, it's such a long sentence. These creative abilities in their finest performances defy time and space, lift man out of the limited context of intellect or emotion alone, and forge both into a higher faculty in which experience is more evidential than any demonstrable fact. And that is what William James explicitly said is not true, is that your experience is not more explicit than fact. Your experience is both subjective and objective. It is limited in its perfection. You are limited in your perfection of your understanding of it. This is contradicted in his actual work. And so if she had addressed his actual work, I wouldn't be upset. She could say, oh, well, he's like I'm doing to her. She could have so easily, back then she had the time, and it wouldn't have been like, look, if you want to understand why I don't do this the way it used to be done traditionally, just glimpse on the Patreon for free I call it HOL notes. Just glimpse what it actually looks like. But that wouldn't have been hard for her because A, she has two people, two minds. She has her husband who can help her collate her research, and she has her who can do the fucking thing. She can read the fucking books. She could do what I'm doing. She could read James and go line by line about how he's wrong. Because in 1978, you were still allowed to do literary criticism. You were still allowed to do that. People still did it a lot. Look, I'm not getting up and I'm not taking my camera to it, but I have two printed in the 70s books that did that with the Bible. People were into that shit still. They still liked it when you published the old book and your commentary and two columns. People liked intensely engaging in intellectual material, and that she refuses to allow her audience to do that means she thinks you're fucking stupid. That's what it means. If you like her, it means she thinks you're fucking stupid. And what you like is people to think you're stupid. What the fuck is that kind of behavior? Why do we do that? You can't answer this in real time. I don't have a good answer for it because I've never given it a lot of thought. I've thought about it, and there's a simple answer, but people tell me all the time, you overthink this stuff. Well, this is my chew toy time. I'm allowed to overthink it. What the fuck is acting like you're stupid for attention? What the fuck is that? Look, I got beat up a lot as a kid by my parents, but the most consistent thing that was going to get my ass beat by my grandparents was doing something that we both agreed was stupid. Making the same mistake twice in my home as a child is PTSD. I was going to get wore the fuck out for making the same mistake twice. It didn't matter what it was. When you work in a manufacturing home, mistakes cost money. And damn, they were going to take that $5 out on my ass because $5 might mean we don't make rent this month. And I just got all emotional, and I don't remember even why the fuck I got that emotional. And that's what this is about for me. It's what it's about for you. And hey, you know what? I got a thumbs up during that. So somebody else thought that was a pretty good thing that I did there too. But man, it bothers me that she's trying to have him unify the intellect and the emotion, unaware of Plotinus. So maybe that's what I'm starting to get a little tired, starting to think I need to take a break. I keep saying that, which means that we're going to go longer. But I need to take a break. She's arguing with Plotinus now, and I am fully of the opinion that she has read exactly zero Plotinus. And look, Kerm and I talk privately on Twitter. It's not that private about the philosophers we do and we do not like, and he wants to do, and I very much want to participate. I'm just a cagey, nervous loner weirdo. Collaborative work talking about the philosophers, like very much like I'm doing here, that we don't like, and I've gone and upset myself, and I'm not sorry that my brain empties when I upset myself and I say something that I'm afraid is going to get a negative response. I'm not sorry for that. That's a trauma response, and it's not my fault. And so if you don't like it, that says more about you than it really does say about me. I'm allowed to be wounded in public, and I'm allowed to advocate that we treat her like she's wounded in public, I think is what I'm trying to say ultimately. But this unifying the intellect and the emotions is stupid. It's just stupid from a philosophical standpoint, even from an ancient women's magic standpoint. This emotions thing is stupid. It's a stupid hill to die on, Jane. Women weren't allowed in mosques because of the emotions. So saying that women, no, saying that unifying your emotions is the true path to enlightenment is in zero of the books. The the Hermes Trismegistus doesn't become Hermes Trismegistus because he becomes enlightened in the men's cults, enlightened in the emotional version of the women's cults, and then re-enlightened in the historical cult. That is not what happened. He was initiated in the men's, the women's, and the men's, but it wasn't to learn how to cry in public. It was to be murdered. The women's cult murdered you. I don't know where he's getting or where William James, like I'm actually arguing with his ghost. This one, I should say this for the audience. Kerm says he wants to do a podcast or a space about Mormon history with me, and that would be really interesting because I wrote a piece last year called "Mormonism has become very interesting to me." Okay, well there you go. Maybe we will get into Mormonism because it's something that I could sit and listen to other people talk about and ask good questions, and that would be a fun experience for me as a podcaster. It's how I end up spending a lot of my time on the fireside chats I do on Fridays with Swolnoggin and Kerm and Co. It's also um, something that the Jay Nicholas and I do every time he can get away from his wonderful and beautiful family. So many single men, so many working men. When they say get away from my family to do X, Y, or Z creative thing, intellectual, emotional thing, it's like the family is holding them back, and they only say that because they're projecting an expectation of how they will be received. And Jane is trying to die on the hill that men have to, how do they put it in the 70s, get in touch with their feminine side, was what people were saying in her time. And just from the perspective of the historian's fallacy from 2024 looking back to 1977, I can emphatically say, don't do that. Your feminine side doesn't mean crying like a bitch and making things up. Um, I'm not going to react to that, Kerm, but I would very much love to do collaborative work with any of you. And well, I shouldn't say any of you. There are some of you that are going to very much try to get me killed, but any of you who are not trying to get me killed, I'm very open to collaboration. Very, very open. I'm a cagey, nerdy weirdo, but I'm very open to working with other artists, regardless of how good your mom thinks you are. My mom hates my shit. But this idea that the intellect and the emotion are separate things is very frustrating. This proto, I don't even know how to say that. I don't know how, I'd have to really bang that out. This idea that, okay, so in 77, when she's writing, right? 77, you've got the idea of the left and the right brain dominance thing, where the left brain has these functions, the right brain has these functions, but they're in 77. They don't have functional MRI, right? So they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They're very much in the early stages of neuroscience, very much in the stages of neuropsychology, is what I wanted to say. So, as always, she's trying, like Edgar Casey was trying, like so many of these people are trying. She's trying to get out in front of the science so that like I need to get out in front of her, she can be more right and she can get the money from the public space, which is scummy, but not scummy. I understand why you would think I'm scummy for doing that, but I also understand why she's in her right mind for that, because there is a decidedly finite amount of money that goes into anything, and the metaphysics that money is decidedly more finite. And so if what you're doing is metaphysics, there's a certain amount of get the money and run while you can that is expected now because of the 70s, because of the 1890s, because of these two periods in time that I'm trying to link together to you because she already has. I don't feel bad about that. I feel pretty good that I'm doing that, actually. So let's I have been putting off this last sentence for so long. Like, just between you and me, like, the the yeah, let's do it, right? Perseverance through adversity. I've been putting this last sentence off for so long. And in which facts themselves are seen to be like wobbly weeds stuck only momentarily in ever shifting sands on the shores of eternity. It's just so melancholy, and it doesn't mean anything. It's the it's her melancholy is what wears me out. That's why I feel so tired. I felt good. I felt let's do this. I might be done for the night. I said I might not be, but I might actually be done reading her for the night. I think I'm gonna take a break. I think I'm gonna shut down the stream because I do have to get up early. I have to remind myself that I have therapy tomorrow. I do have other things than hanging out here with you guys. This has been so much fun for me this last 5 days. I hate that so much. What I'm reading, I hate it. I hate is let's talk about emotions. She wants us talking about emotions. She wants us thinking about emotions. So let's just take 10 minutes. Let's just take 10 minutes and let's just really give her what she wants. Let's surrender in the way that she wants to imitate Muhammad and Islam, and let's give her what she wants. Because in a lot of ways, no one is going to like to hear this. Someone is going to drop out because I've said this. In a lot of ways, feminism is holding civilization hostage with no demands. And that's what she's doing. I hate it, but it's so melancholy. That's what bothers me. It's the okay, you can't answer this real time. So answer in the comments if you think you have an opinion, because there are people in the world who are older than I am. That's something that sounds stupid to say out loud, but I do have to remind myself of that a lot. Um, Blazing Saddles. I always thought that joke where the sheriff, our main character, um, holds himself hostage, right? Turns the gun on himself and he says, nobody move, or he gets it. I'm not going to directly quote that movie. I don't like that kind of language. Um, Nobody move or he gets it. And everybody freaks out. And then he leaves. As a person not wearing this hat, I just don't particularly care for the director, whose name I can never remember because I just don't particularly care for him. I don't think he's particularly funny. I don't think his work is particularly funny. Spaceballs was good, but Spaceballs is good because Spaceballs came out in 78 right after Star Wars. And Star Wars is great. And so spoofing on things that are truly great is just funny. It's hard to miss. And 78 I believe 78 was when Star Trek was really taken off. So 1978 was a really good time to do the kind of work we're doing. And you know what? Just to indicate to anybody that's coming in, this is going to be confusing because I did this for 3 hours yesterday, but I'm going to take the hat off to let anybody know that I am winding down now. But what's that about? Do you think there's a deeper meaning to that? Tell me in the comments. I know he backs himself out of the situation like that. I always thought that was just a bit, just a whatever, and I never really understood it, and I never really thought about it beyond that. But what I just said, that feminism is in a lot of ways very, very, very seriously, and I'm not being negatively critical. I'm just trying to identify what I see is holding civilization for ransom with no, or for ransom is what I mean, for no with no demands. And so in my mind, what I'm seeing is Waco, except whoever David Koresh is and among feminists. So let's just say this book we're engaging with Jane Roberts, but the Jane Roberts isn't giving me the out to rescue people from her. She's saying, because, well, who am I rescuing? I'm rescuing her, right? She's saying, give me what I want, or else I'll what? And that's the other thing, is it's not an immediate and it's not an obvious danger that she's put herself in. This is something that Jay and I ended up talking about, and he actually ended up convincing me that I was wrong about this. On his space on Twitter, we did a top 10 Nietzsche's quotes that I hate, and I'm sorry for my head hair. You're just gonna have to deal with my head looking the way it does. Um, what was I saying? And that's just entirely gone now. That's fine. I have brain damage, and that's gonna happen sometimes, guys. I need visual reminders. Can somebody feed me what the hell I was just talking about? Emotions and damn, I am embarrassed. I'm sorry for that. Um her fixation on emotions is so, it's so linked to her time, and I don't understand it, and it all just makes me feel so beat in the head. Just an hour with her makes me feel like she's just bludgeoning me over and over and over in the head. And yeah, I was getting to something and I don't remember what it was. I'm really sorry. I don't have any control over when that happens, and I know it makes me unreliable in that way. That's why I choose to do these readings. There's somebody else. Somebody, I'm thinking of somebody that I want to leave you with to think about before we go into this next part. And I don't know what it is. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm letting you down. I know I'm not letting you down. It's been 3 hours. I promised you 2 hours. She, I feel bad for her. I feel bad for William James' ghost. Yeah, it's the material spinning me out. It's not my fault. She's doing this to me on purpose. She's trying to be slippery like this so that if I try to grapple with it, I can't even remember what it is, because she's not making core claims that I can grapple with. And she's setting her argument up in such a way that she's saying claim, separate claim, disclaimer, third claim, first claim is false, second claim, second disclaimer, new claim. You understand what it's a pattern that goes like that. So she can't be held to any account. You can't say, well, this is what she believes, this is what she doesn't believe. And then even in the ghost, if the ghost experience is happening, and it's easy to dismiss that it's not, because it is apparently not happening. It's inconsistent enough to say that it's not happening. But then why continue if it's not happening? Why read any of it at all, except to have read it? Yeah, that's I think ultimately what I want to end on is a sort of virtue for William James, that he he really did kick all of this off. It really is his fault in a real way, but he did not deserve this. He didn't deserve to be remembered by a whole swath of people as this. Because what I think about is, what if you came to Jane Roberts and William James out of order? What if you came to Jane Roberts and you really liked Jane Roberts? You read all of her fantasy books, all her sci-fi books, you read all of her everything, and then you learned, oh, she made this book called The Afterdeath Journal of a Guy, and then you read the thing, and then you read James. I feel really bad for anybody who clicks into this because she likes Jane Roberts and then I'm shitting on her. That's why I make it a caps. Hate reading this. I don't like it, and I don't like the person who wrote it. And that shouldn't be a part of it. We should be able to separate ourselves from that, but I don't think we have to, because the author isn't dead in the text. The author is alive. We read texts and we critique text and we discuss texts in the first, not the first person, in the present tense, because between the covers of the page, the covers of the book, it's always happening now. Do you understand what I mean by that? But do you understand the greater depth that opens up to? When Antoninus Liberalis, when I was reading Antoninus Liberalis for you today, he's still saying that today. That's still his mind, even though it's been translated away from his ownership and it's been translated away from his direct words in a beautiful, emotionally attractive way. He's still composing that book today for the first time, composing that book for the first time today. He's still editing it and making it perfect for the first time today. That's why I have been drawn away. I began this thing talking about my own reading habits, and so I'll end it talking about my reading habits. I read a lot of nonfiction and I read a lot of scripture because the great stuff was so perfectly edited, you can't tell it was edited at all. That's what's good. The Bible is different. The Bible is interesting because it was intentionally edited in such a way for you to obviously see the seams, because the seams in and of themselves are a mystery that begs to be solved. That's what I wanted to talk about. I knew if I just waffled long enough, I would get there. Hey, thank you so much for joining me right at the end of this and for sticking around as I waffle toward this, because this is the most important thing I want to say. And it's gone. Damn it. It's gone. That's going to happen to me. This book is a mystery. Mysteries beg to be solved. Okay? Mysteries beg to be solved. True genius, when they sit down to write a mystery, whether that be a murder mystery, whether it be scripture like the Bible, or whether it be what this woman has written, it's written and composed and presented to you in such a way that, like Madame Blavatsky makes of the claim of her secret doctrine, when you get to the end of it, you will be enlightened because you got to the end of it. So, in short form, here's how we're going to wrap up. I got there. I woke up with that thought, and I thought there's something important that I need to say. And that was what it was. That this stuff is all arranged and composed, written and finished in the finished product with the claim, because the Bible makes this claim and because the Bible will do this. When you get to the end, having read it all the way through front to back, you will be initial caps enlightened. That is the claim that Madame Blavatsky makes, because that's the claim that the Bible makes, and that's the claim that Jane Roberts is making, because she's already spoken to us in the voice of Adam's third son and God's favorite of Adam's children, and now William James. In some people's opinion, God's favorite American, period. What she's doing is a deep psyop. It is intended to break your brain, and she'll tell you that that brokenness is enlightenment. And I'm here to tell you that if it is, it fucking sucks. Don't chase it out, but stick with me and we'll get you there safely so that you don't have that brokenness. Everybody talks about the brokenness inside them. You don't want to I talk about female cult being murder. What they would do to you is murder you. Stop looking for ego murderers. Stop looking for somebody to Ted Bundy your ego. It's weird. And that's what I have to say. Hey, thanks for sticking around. Most recent click in. That was really cool of you to hang out with me for this last 10 minutes while I closed up. I want to come back. I want to do another 5. I want to do longer. I want to prove that at least in that way I'm better than she is. At least I can sustain it for longer than 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. I can look how long I can sustain it. But age is damage plus time. It's the accrued damage over time. And so the longer I stress my body, the longer I stress my brain, the more I put myself out there in a position to accrue damage over time, the faster I age myself out of my market. So I do have to go slow, significantly slower than I want to. Thank you so much for being here. I already have the meta text planned out for tomorrow. Um, Tomorrow is going to be a weird sleep day for me, so I may or may not start at 8 again, 8 o'clock p.m. again. I will probably start then. That's when I want to. I may start earlier if I grab a nap in the middle of the day. We'll see how my eating goes tomorrow. Tomorrow is a big day for me in my personal life. Um, I don't really want to talk about that on the podcast if I can avoid it, especially here as I'm wrapping up in front of strangers. But if you pray, just ask God for one for the Shaggy Dog Philosopher. He's got a big, big, difficult day ahead of him tomorrow. All right, thank you guys. I'm not getting any closing commentaries from you guys. No, so it's been truly delightful. I've run 5 minutes over when I said I was going to be done. Um, yeah, thank you, thank you very much. I'm humbled by this in a big way, and I really appreciate those likes are they're an encouragement to do it tomorrow. So between now and when I pick up, take care of yourself. That's the only thing that's truly important to me. You take care of you, okay? Till tomorrow.